Morning to Travis Peterson behind the controls of our YouTube channel. And if you're watching on YouTube this morning, good morning to you. It is, as mentioned, ahead of 6 o'clock. Heather Wells is in with our headlines. Hi there.
Hi. Well, Winnipeg retailers are coping with a huge increase in theft. Police say retail theft is 44% higher for the first half of this year compared to last year. They say they're targeting enforcement, especially in the lead up to Christmas. We're going to hear from a downtown Winnipeg grocer coming up. And Premier Wab Kinew says Manitoba can't just stop collecting the federal carbon tax on home heating. The Premier unveiled a legal opinion to that effect yesterday, but that is what Manitoba's opposition PCs want the NDP government to do. We're going to hear more on that story as well in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the program today, in the first hour, the Assembly of First Nations is set to elect a new leader this week. This comes after months of controversy and upheaval at the organization. We'll run through who is running. We'll look at the Manitoba candidates as well. So that's coming up at about 10 to 7. In addition, in the first hour of the show, what if I told you there was a way for airlines to get you on the plane faster and give you a better chance of finding space in the overhead bin? Now you're all up and listening. We'll have that story coming up at 6:40. How to fly more efficiently? Maybe that's the word. Coming up later in the show as well, what a story we have coming up after 7. You might have lived through this. A true crime documentary is now focused on a deadly attack that happened in Altona in 1990. We'll walk through the details of that and find out who's made this documentary. It's already won awards in Whistler at the film festival. So stay tuned. Lots coming up, but World Report is next.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Steven Sanchez is what they call an old soul. He's had billions of streams and a lot of success on TikTok, singing songs that sound more like 1963 than 2023. Steven Sanchez will be here to tell you why his music is having a moment right now.
Baby, give it all.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcy Young. First Nations chiefs are gathering in Ottawa for a crucial vote. Hundreds of members of the country's Indigenous communities are picking a new leader. 6 candidates are running. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, an important issue for many of them focuses on a dark period of Canadian history and ways to bring it further into the light.
Me, myself, I'm a 60 scoop survivor myself.
Cornell McLean is the chief of Lake Manitoba First Nation. He's behind a resolution calling for a national inquiry into the 60 scoop, a practice from the 1950s until the early 1990s, when more than 20,000 Indigenous children were taken from their homes and placed with non-Indigenous families.
And there's lots of people out there that are still wondering who their families are, wondering who their communities are.
Cindy Woodhouse says she supports the call, a position she shares with the other 5 candidates vying to become the next national chief of the Assembly of First Nations.
I support it because we are in a reconciliation process with Canada.
Dean Sayers is running for the top job, along with David Pratt, who says an inquiry would address a crisis that continues today.
We have more children in child welfare right now in care of the provinces and territory social services system than at the height of the residential school.
Sheila North is running for national chief a second time. She says she supports the issue, but doesn't want to see a repeat of past inquiries where recommendations sit on a shelf.
And if there is one for a 60 scoop, I hope that going forward we'll start to build in the implementation plan ahead of time.
An inquiry could be at the top of the next national chief's to-do list after the ballots are cast tomorrow. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Israel says it is entering a new phase of its war with Hamas in Gaza. A government spokesperson is warning the country's second stage of fighting against Hamas is going to be difficult militarily. Overnight, airstrikes and gunfights continued in Gaza South. At Nasser Hospital, injured people are pulled out of the cars and off trucks that brought them in for care. Khan Yunis has been at the center of intense fighting. Dozens of people have been killed. Aid groups say civilians are paying the price for this war. Mariana Sploracic is the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross. She was in Khan Yunis earlier today.
We can't turn away from what is evidently a moral failure in the face of the international community. I'm calling on all parties, on everyone who has an influence, to de-escalate and to find the military solutions to what is an immense suffering of the people on both sides.
An official with the United Nations says humanitarian operations may not be able to respond if fighting intensifies. Ukraine's president will be back before U.S. lawmakers making another pitch for support. Appearing by video, Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to update senators on his country's battle with Russian forces. The White House has been urging the Senate to unlock another $60 billion in funding for Ukraine. There's been a lot of pushback. The CBC's Richard Madden joins us now from Washington. And Richard, let's start with the funding issue. What's the concern?
Well, President Zelensky is expected to make that urgent push for more U.S. aid when he speaks to U.S. senators through a secure video link later this afternoon. And this comes at a critical time with new funding for Ukraine stalled in Congress. A growing number of Republicans say they'll vote against it unless Democrats boost funding to secure America's southern border. So this puts in jeopardy President Biden's $100 billion aid package, with $60 billion of that earmarked for Ukraine. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is urging his colleagues to support it.
The world is watching what we do in Congress these coming weeks. You can bet Vladimir Putin is watching, Hamas is watching, Iran, President Xi, North Korea, all our adversaries. They're watching closely.
Now, the White House has warned funding for Ukraine is nearly spent, and Congress needs to approve more funding by the end of the year. The White House says the lack of funding would, quote, kneecap Ukraine on the battlefield against the Russian invasion.
So, Richard, what exactly are we going to hear from Zelensky?
Right. Senator Schumer says Zelensky will outline, quote, what's at stake as fears grow of a stalemate in a war approaching 2 years. Now, the U.S. is the world's largest contributor of aid for Ukraine, but a growing sense of war fatigue and congressional gridlock is putting that funding in question.
Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Richard Madden reporting. Cyclone Mitchum has made landfall in southern India. Torrential rains and high winds have grounded planes at Chennai Airport. Officials say at least 9 people have been killed. That includes a 4-year-old boy who died after a wall collapsed. Evacuation orders have been issued for about 8,000 people. There are concerns this morning about the fate of the CBC and some of its programming. The corporation announced yesterday it is prepared to cut 10% of its workforce as it faces a $125 million budget shortfall. CBC's president, Catherine Tate, says that means about 600 jobs cut. The CBC's Janice McGregor is in Ottawa. Janice, Catherine Tate announced this before the CBC's budget for next year is even finalized. Why?
Catherine Tate said yesterday laying out a plan now for how they're going to adjust to a tightening financial situation is a responsible thing for CBC management to do. But revealing that the magnitude of the government's proposed cuts translates into 800 lost jobs, including a few hundred in Quebec, where cuts to cultural industries are a very politically sensitive thing, that puts a lot of pressure on the federal cabinet and especially Heritage Minister Pascal Saint-Onge, who seemed to be saying yesterday that even though the CBC was asked to review its budget just like other federal crown corporations, things maybe aren't final just yet.
Every ministry and every agency is currently doing the work of making a plan according to those cuts, but the final decision concerning CBC Radio-Canada has not been made yet.
The CBC's budget has to pass through a minority parliament. What were the opposition parties saying yesterday?
Pierre Poilievre posting last night the CBC is out there saying it's broke again after paying $99 million in bonuses to, quote, incompetent executives and liberal talking heads. But Bloc MP Alexis Brunel-Doucet pointed out to his followers that Poilievre only said this in English, making sure his francophone voters saw how the Conservative leader was delighted with the job losses in Quebec newsrooms and saying that the silence from Quebec Conservative MPs made them complicit. Now, a Conservative MP from Saskatchewan, Kevin Waugh, didn't stay silent. Here's what he said yesterday.
Yeah, no, it's a sad day when people lose their job in the industry. It's sad.
Peter Julian said New Democrats want to see the Liberals take real steps to protect news, especially for communities that rely heavily on CBC to stay connected. We'll see, however, if the NDP is prepared to go to the mat for the CBC in next spring's budget negotiations.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. In New Brunswick, the peat moss industry is reporting one of its worst seasons in decades. The province is one of the biggest producers. Peat moss is essential for gardeners and commercial greenhouses. The CBC's Alexander Silberman reports.
On a gusty fall day on Lamec Island, Jean-Yves Dague treads across the vast peatlands, a kaleidoscope of vivid red, white, and green vegetation. Dague stops and kneels down, tearing a handful of sphagnum moss from the ground and showing the organic soil underneath.
To have a thickness of about 1 meter, it would take 1,000 years to accumulate material.
That material, decomposed over centuries, is peat, a lucrative business on New Brunswick's Acadian Peninsula. It's processed and shipped around the world as a starter for everything from roses to the greens on golf courses. But this summer, frequent rainstorms left the fields too swampy for harvesting. Dague, who runs the Industry Association, says production dropped to 40% of a typical year.
23, that's the worst season ever, according to the older peat producers.
At this processing plant in Rexton, production is down to 30%. Manager René Duguay says less peat means fewer shifts for his seasonal workers.
It's very tough for the industry, as well as for our employees.
Duguay expects many processing plants will run out of peat this winter, and that could mean a shortage on the market this spring. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Lamec, New Brunswick.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, hello, Manitoba, and welcome to your Tuesday morning. I'm Markusa. This is Information Radio. We are live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the CBC Listen app. Or you might also be joining us on YouTube this morning. Thanks for tuning in. In Winnipeg, we're going to have a day that's similar to yesterday, a little different. We do have patchy fog expected, but nothing like what we had yesterday. Pat with the forecast in just a moment. And today we're going to head to a high around -1. This hour on the program, first up on the show, we're going to talk to the co-founder of a group that's hoping to feed a record number of hungry Winnipeggers this holiday season. And they need some help from you. So stay tuned. We'll hear more about their efforts in our community. In addition, this hour, what if we told you there was a way for airlines to get you on the plane faster and then give you a better chance of finding space in the overhead bin? Space that you don't have to elbow for. Stay tuned. We'll find out more about that. Right now, though, let's turn our attention to news and get the headline update from Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg retailers say they're doing what they can to deter thieves. Police say retail theft is 44% higher for the first half of this year compared to last year. At Family Foods downtown, owner Kevin Schmidt says some people are brazen enough to steal an entire basket of groceries. He uses stickers on some items with sensors that sound when they're taken out the door. A Manitoba town's grief in the wake of a teen's brutal murder more than 30 years ago is at the heart of a new docu-film. Altona debuted and won an award at the Whistler Film Festival over the weekend. We'll tell you more about that documentary in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
And in fact, we have the documentary makers on, two of the four brothers that were behind this, after 7 o'clock on the show. So we'll have good coverage of that story that many people lived through and will remember. It was just... I don't even know if the word disturbing describes it, but you'll remember if you were here in 1990. So that's coming up in the program today. In addition today, just before we turn to the weather forecast, you might have heard on World Report, I know it was on the 4 o'clock cast as we were coming in. 4 or 5 o'clock? 5 o'clock cast. Hi, Pat Kanuga.
What were you doing up at 4? You're up already?
Yeah, I was up already.
I was too.
World Report had a story about shrinkflation. Now, there's been a number of these stories done through the year. The latest one that really stuck with me was the pop bottles. So shrinkflation is where you think you're paying for a certain amount of a product, and in fact, there's less than you thought, and kind of can sneak in different ways. The 2-liter pop bottles, did you hear this one, Pat? You know the bottom has an indentation? Mm-hmm. So in some cases, that indentation was made bigger on the bottom, so it would displace, volume of liquid, and you'd actually be getting less pop. So have you noticed this in your world?
Well, I have. In the World Report story, I was talking about a gentleman who bought a 2-kilogram box of Cheerios, and he thought, this isn't 2 kilograms. He weighed it. It was 500 grams. So he made a couple of complaints about that. Now, I have noticed my wife buys these cookies, and you think like there's, several columns of them, but then when you open them up, there's plastic pieces that come up.
Yeah.
So where you think is cookie is packaging, right?
They're on a riser.
Yeah, that's exactly
It's like shoes with a lift. You're not that tall.
Yeah.
So you have like 3 cookies and you thought you should get 6.
You think you're getting 16 cookies in a package and they're 12.
Good for your waistline, not for your pocketbook.
I don't eat cookies anyway, so maybe it's a good thing. But yes, shrinkflation. So that was on World Report, and we're asking people this morning, right?
Just wondering if they've got examples, what you've seen out there, and if you have examples, and maybe it's changed your shopping habits. Because, of course, our dollar only goes so far today, and the dollars are scarce today. So just curious whether or not it's impacted even what you're buying. Maybe you used to buy a certain product, and you're noticing you're getting less, so you're shopping around in a different way, especially for staples for the family as well. So you can call the listener line. Always love hearing your voice. 788-3205. You can write to us in a number of different ways on our socials. You can even write to us on YouTube in the comment section too. All right, let's get into the forecast. It says freezing fog, but this is nothing like that whiteout yesterday. Well, I shouldn't say whiteout, but it was sure thick, that fog yesterday.
Yeah, and we do have some freezing fog in the Brandon area where it's -8 right now on the way to a +1. And we'll see clearing skies this afternoon. I'm looking at satellite and radar images. Doesn't look too cloudy in that part of the province right now. The clouds are everywhere else, including north Interlake area and eastern Manitoba, but that southwest corner not as bad. But Saskatchewan, it looks like there's a whole whack more of cloud coming in the next few hours, so we'll keep an eye on that. But Brandon will see that high of +1 today, and should see those clouds around this morning. Tonight dipping down to a low of -2. That's not very cold. And then tomorrow a high of +5 for Brandon. We'll see clearing skies in the morning. Let's go up to Thompson right now. It's -7 on the way to a -4. Clouds as well. And here in the city of Winnipeg, we're -5 right now, and we are cloudy, and we could have some patchy fog in parts of southern Manitoba. Maybe not quite like what we had yesterday in the city of Winnipeg, that's for sure. It was very foggy, but we'll see a -1 today, and a calm day. Winds south 15 this afternoon. Tonight dipping down to a -4. Tomorrow there's a couple of days of sunny and 7 tomorrow, so the light dusting of snow we have could go away tomorrow here in Winnipeg. Thursday a 6, and then Friday we could see some wet snow, so the snow replenished with a +1. But into your weekend a -6 and a -9. But all next week daytime -single digits still, so no deep freeze around the corner. Once again, we are -5 in the city of Winnipeg. I do want to mention something in traffic. That traffic line is 788-3093. But something that'll affect people that want to take the St. Vital Bridge. So at 9 o'clock today, 9 till 3, basically one span of the bridge they've been working on, that's done. So you've been taking the northbound span to get from Dunkirk towards Osborne Village, etc. They're going to be switching that around today, so eventually you're going to be taking the new span that has been the southbound span. So that'll be 2 lanes of traffic
I
there.
Selfishly hope that listeners call us. Do you remember when they reopened, I think it was part of Disraeli, and we got the best call on the traffic line where they were like so happy? The driver was cheering.
This will just be just like before, because you're going to have two-way traffic on the same span.
So
they're just going from one span to the other.
That was a complete open.
So you could look at this saying that construction project is half done.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
If you're sitting in traffic this morning at 6:16 in the morning, 788-3093 is the traffic and commuting line.
Well, many Manitobans are struggling with high food prices. Local food banks, soup kitchens, and other supports are seeing an increasing number of people that are reaching out for assistance. Deanna Stroud is co-founder of the Peg City Kindness Crew. She says that her crew received a shock last week after their online hamper request form went live. Just over 24 hours after the request form opened, the Peg City Kindness crew actually had to shut it down. They'd received 700 hamper requests. That's more than triple the requests from last year. Deanna and the Peg City Kindness crew are committed to fulfilling every request, but they need some help to make this happen. And Deanna's up early and on Zoom with us today to join us on the show. Hi there.
Hi, good morning.
Wow. So what did you think? I mean, you open the phone lines and this starts happening. What were you thinking?
Yeah, we actually have an online application form that we put out. We're a very small group, so there's really, this year we have 6, luckily, that are helping, but in the past it's been 4, and prior to that was 2. So it's a small group, so we have the application form. That way we can, access it as we have time. We did 202 last year. This year we were expecting more. Obviously, there's so many more families that are struggling that really, I don't think they've ever been in a position where they thought they would need a hamper, but people are, they're paying their mortgage or their rent, they're paying their insurance and their gas to get to and from work because they need to work, and there's not a lot left over. So I think there's a huge influx of people that are needing extra help. So we figured it'd be higher, but we had no idea that it would be 700, no idea. We are a not-for-profit. We're not funded at all. We just recently registered as not-for-profit this year, so we'd, be able to access things like Second Harvest and Bimbo Wholesale Bakery. They help us out with some extras. But we're just like, we're very community driven. So we weren't expecting it. And we basically just said we need to shut it down because we don't want false hope, but we will do everything we can to fill these 700.
How hard was the decision to shut it down? I can't even imagine, because the need's coming in, right? And you're like, well, we want to be able to fulfill things, but we can't leave this line open much longer, I'm guessing. How tough was that?
Yeah. Oh, don't make me cry on film. It's hard because we just really don't want to say no to people. We haven't to date. We've been doing this since 2020, and we've always found a way to help people. We do this all year round, not so heavy on the hampers. That's usually at Christmas, but we help the community every time we find an opportunity or a way to do something that we feel can make a difference, or, use our amazing platform of people that listen and help. We do it, but this is a big one all, at once.
Yeah. So 700, you're going to commit to this goal because that's, people phone, so you're going to commit to it. What do you need?
Yeah.
What goes into these hampers, and what are your needs?
Yeah, well, this year specifically, the biggest need that would help us absolutely the most would be for people to sponsor a family. So we have these 700 families. Some of them have, 3 to 4 people. We have one family that has 17 members in one household. So obviously that's a much larger hamper to just feed them even a meal. So basically sponsoring a family would be huge. And what that entails is we would basically give you a rough template of suggested items that we would put in depending on the size of the family. And then you would go and do your own shopping. You'd be assigned basically the family, their contact information, their delivery address, and you make arrangements with the family directly of when works best for both of you to get the hamper to them. And what that does is, it takes one of them, that they're covered, that's one less hamper that's still needed. But it also takes it off of our plate to actually need to do the shopping, the packing, the coordinating, the deliveries, etc. So that is the biggest help currently.
So can I ask, when people are thinking, you mentioned food, obviously there's food items that that will go into the hampers. Are there also toys, or are these strictly food hampers?
So we have done toys in the past, our first year. This year we're not. This year food is first and foremost the most important thing. People are hungry, and we wanted to focus all of our attention on that. That being said, just a side note, we are doing an event for Norquay Elementary School. It's student run there. We've been collecting gently used or new, but gently used is just fine, doesn't have to be new, toys and lotions, candles, books, anything that would be nice. And basically the kids will get to go in the gymnasium and shop through all of the things. Obviously there's no cost involved. We'll have a gift dropping station set up so they can go in and shop for every member of their family, wrap all of the gifts, make a little card, and take home their goodies to put under the tree, or not. If they don't have a tree, they can just take it home and share. So that's what we're doing for gifts and toys this year. It's separate, but the hampers themselves is a completely different thing, and we're sticking strictly with food.
What were the commonalities when you were these 700 families, talking to you, and you're taking down details? You said 17 people in one family. What did you hear from people? Is it all over the place, like in terms of the sizes of the families, or what did people share about their own needs in our community?
We don't ask for a ton of details. The form is basically, we just need to know, how many people are in your family. We often ask, like, how many adults, how many children, and then where they are, and a contact information, and a little bit of detail to do with maybe when they're available to receive hampers, because some of the communities, people are concerned if you leave it on their porch that they won't get it when they get home. So we do try and accommodate that.
Were there lots of families with children, or were there? I know on Friday we did our show for Harvest Manitoba, and they were talking about an increasing number of families that are using the food banks across Manitoba that are employed, but they just can't make ends meet. Lots of children, but also lots of single people. Seniors still high in the numbers, right?
Yeah, and we have people ask too. They're like, "Oh, do you only like help families?" Or, "I'm just a single person." But no, we help people. You don't have to fit in a box. You're a person, and we care about you. So of course we will figure out how to help.
Why do you do this? What motivates you, Deanna, to continue to care for community in this way?
I don't know. Why are you making me cry so much?
I know, because it's the time of year and there's so much need. I bawled like a child all Friday show. You don't have to worry about that. That's your emotion coming out because you're a helper.
Yeah. I like to help people. I always have, ever since I was a kid. I think it's important to get outside of yourself. We all have things that we go through. There's stuff that feels heavy some days, some heavier for others. It doesn't matter. Just be a person, be kind, lead with your heart. Don't judge, if you can. Judgment's not, human nature, but really try and just have an open mind and trust that you never know what someone else is going through. Truly, like you have no clue. And just assume that kindness will always be the way to spread, the goodness in the world. And I truly believe in that. I think it's important to put that out. Between my partner and we have 6 kids. So I want to be a good role model for them, just teaching them that, again, just be a good person. It is way easier to be a good person than it is to do crappy things and treat people poorly. So just pour your heart into being good, and you can't go wrong. You'll never go wrong with being nice. So it's important to help. Just help people every way you can.
Leave us with the phone number or a website, how people can, give donations if they can't give a full hamper, or how they connect with you if they can sign up for a full hamper. Where should they go for details?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're having some technical issues with our sponsorship sign up. So if you did sponsor a family and then you haven't heard from us, we didn't know you did it. So please reach out. We are primarily on Facebook. We are on Instagram as well, but Facebook seems to be our main hub. So you can message us through there. It's Peg City Kindness Crew Inc. You can also reach us by email, pegcitykindnesscrew@gmail.com. That's the same email address that you can send e-transfers to. It could be $5. It could be $24,000. That's the number we need right now to fill all the hampers. But basically, that is the best way to get a hold of us, and we will figure out what your budget is and partner you with a family, or just give us the money and we will do the shopping and coordinate the drivers and get the hampers there too. Any way you can help, or drop off food. There's places all over the city. You can find all that on our site.
So I wrote down pegcitykindnesscrew@gmail.com.
You bet.
I got it right. Excellent. Have a wonderful rest of your day, Deanna. Thanks for being with us this morning. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Deanna Stroud is the co-founder of Peg City Kindness Crew. You can find out more, as you heard, about the crew and how you can help by visiting their Facebook page. You can directly reach out at pegcitykindnesscrew@gmail.com.
Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make the season bright. But singing along to Yuletide classics and new holiday favorites is what really makes the holly jolly. CBC Music unwraps the gift of holiday playlists to get you into the festive spirit. From pop to jazz, gospel, folk, blues, classical, country, and so many more. Now available on the CBC Listen app.
Found a box of Christmas cards to send to my old friends. Memories of early days.
They're your friends right now. This is artist out of Alberta. This is Kelly Cardinal, and it's called A Christmas Letter to My Friends. It is CBC that you're listening to. You can see me queuing Abby. Turn the music back up, but the song was over. So you have to find it. If you want to find more music from her, by the way, her 2019 album, Stories from a Downtown Apartment in Alberta, won the Juno Award for Indigenous Music Album of the Year. Coming up, we have business news right here on CBC. I'm Marcy Markusa. You're listening on 89.3 FM. But right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is another mild morning. -5 right now. We may still see some patchy fog out there, and we're hoping we get a little bit of sun this afternoon. Today's high is -1. Winnipeg retailers are coping with a huge increase in theft. At Family Foods downtown, owner Kevin Schmidt says theft has shot up. Police say retail theft is 44% higher for the first half of this year compared to last year. They say they are targeting enforcement, especially in the lead up to Christmas. Schmidt says some people are brazen enough to steal an entire basket of groceries.
We will try to retrace their steps just to see exactly what they've taken out of the store, what are they targeting, what kind of total value they have for what's inside that basket, so that we know, okay, maybe this is something else we have to start keeping a closer eye on.
Schmidt has put stickers on high-priced items like meat and health and beauty products. They will set off a sensor at the door. He's also moved butter and cheese to the front of the store. Premier Wab Kinew unveiled a legal opinion yesterday saying Manitoba can't simply stop collecting the federal carbon tax on home heating. The opposition PCs say that doesn't matter. Tory energy critic Grant Jackson says the carbon tax has already lost in the court of public opinion. He says Manitoba should have the courage to stop collecting the tax.
We know that Saskatchewan is moving ahead with this. We know that this may cause a bit of a disagreement, shall we say, with the federal government should our provincial government decide to implement this, but that doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do.
PC leader Heather Stephenson has said for months the Tories have a favourable legal opinion of their own. When asked by the NDP to produce that opinion, they have declined to do so. A Manitoba town's grief in the wake of a teen's brutal murder more than 30 years ago is at the heart of a new docu-film.
I often describe what happened that night as a lightning strike. Some individuals were struck by lightning. Some individuals saw the lightning bolt strike, but the whole community heard the thunder.
Altona debuted and won an award at the Whistler Film Festival over the weekend. It's named after the small town where two teens were tied up, assaulted, and left to die in a burning house on November 17, 1990. Filmmaker Thomas A. Folter and his brothers wanted to use the film to step away from usual tactics employed by true crime.
The event itself is very harrowing, but then the documentary goes on to cover much more of the real world sort of human impact of this event. It's set up as a true crime piece.
The documentary features animations of never-before-told eyewitness accounts, as well as a written statement by the convicted killer. To the Middle East now, where Israeli warplanes heavily bombarded an area around Han Yunis in southern Gaza as the military ordered mass evacuations from that town. James Elder is with the aid group UNICEF. He left Gaza yesterday.
It's so packed, it's so densely populated before all of this. Now you've got 1.8 million people displaced. Anything that is thrown in there, any explosive has to hit someone or something. There is a degree now of horror and fear in people that has taken root on the streets. You know, people stop you and plead for water or, take me with you. It is a level of alarm and anxiety that I've never seen before.
The Israeli military is fighting the militant group Hamas, which launched a deadly attack against Israel October 7th. Israel says Hamas is embedded in residential areas and it's trying to minimize civilian casualties. You can hear the latest on what's happening in Gaza, as well as more national and international news on World Report at 7. A Winnipeg man accused of giving cannabis candies to trick-or-treaters on Halloween last year no longer faces prosecution. The charges against Sheldon Chochinov have been stayed. Chochinov was one of 2 people charged after police said they got more than a dozen reports of the cannabis candies being given out in a South Tuxedo neighborhood. Police said children who received the edibles were between 6 and 16 years old. Chochinov's lawyer told a judge last month his client had no knowledge of possessing any illegal substances. The Public Prosecution Service of Canada said the charges against Chochinov were stayed because the case no longer met the threshold of prosecution. The Winnipeg Jets felt the force of the Hurricanes in the first period last night, and then
Nikolai Ehlers is in. He waits. Kyle Connor scores!
Kyle Connor in the first period on Sportsnet, in a period where Carolina was out shooting Winnipeg at that point 12-1. Another goal by Nikolai Ehlers in the second gives the Jets the win, 2-1 over the Hurricanes. But it was goalie Laurent Brossoit who saved the day with 42 saves last night. He was in the zone.
Today I felt more like myself, more like I did last year, and I'm looking to harness that and continue on that path.
The Winnipeg Jets' path takes them on the road now for 4 games. First up is Colorado on Thursday. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
So I know that Pat was watching that game. Heather, you tuned in last night too?
Yes.
Yeah, Brossoit was amazing, right?
Incredible. Wow, stand on his head.
He was amazing. It could have been 5-0 in the first period. Funny enough, so the Jets finally got their first shot, about 3 minutes, with about 3 minutes left in the first period.
That first period was looking dismal for the Jets.
And there was a Bronx cheer, right? Meaning the crowd gave a real big round of applause when they finally got that first shot. But then within a minute, they scored. So after that onslaught of shots and Brossoit just stopping everything, I said to my son, I'm like, watch, Jets are going to score here. And they did. Then they went up 2-0. It was a great game last night. Really enjoyed it.
You're a good predictor there.
Except for that first. Well, it's like, are you kidding? He's stopping absolutely everything. And then kind of Murphy's Law would be, oh, look, the Jets scored after all that. So anyway, it was a great game. Go Jets.
We'll see what they do from here on in. We're kind of at the time of year where I know we're still early in the season, but you start to really pay attention, right?
Yeah.
To wins and losses and the math.
3 games in, I think.
Yeah,
so.
every point counts now.
All right, let's get into what is happening in the forecast details. Then Abby added some additional information about something this morning. So let's do weather first, then get into traffic.
We shall. Here we are. It's -5 in the city of Winnipeg right now. We're going to get to a -1, so the warmth continues. Not much wind today, Marcy. South 10 this morning, so cyclists, South 10, and South 15 this afternoon. But we are going to be pretty cloudy right now, and then expect some clearing skies. So we'll see a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon. Tonight, dipping down to a very frigid low of -4, he said sarcastically. And then tomorrow is that day when we see a 7 in the sunshine, which is pretty rare for what will be December 6th tomorrow. And again, a calm day expected. Thursday, 6 for a daytime high. And then we could see some rain beginning overnight, changing to wet flurries by Friday morning. So Friday, we're going to see a +1. So it's going to be a bit of a messy day on Friday morning anyway to wake up to that. Into your weekend, colder, a -6 and a -9 for Saturday and Sunday. Over in Brandon, -6 right now, and some possible freezing fog is being reported right now. A mix of sun and cloud today once that fog dissipates, and a high of +1 if there is some of that freezing fog going on right now. Tonight down to -2, and tomorrow a high of +5 with clearing skies in the morning. Good morning, Thompson. Up Highway 6. You have some mist right now at 6:38 in the morning, and a -7. You get to a -4 today with cloudy skies. Cloudy tonight. Good chance of snow into the late evening and overnight. And tomorrow we'll wake up with a -5, and tomorrow is a daytime high of -1 with cloud cover again. Some quick temps for you. We're looking at zeros in places for daytime highs today, as in places such as Steinbach, where it's -5 right now. -14 in Dauphin, but you're going to warm up to that 0 as well. Morden, Winkler, Pembina Valley, we'll see a +1, but it's -9 right now. Interlake, Gimli area, -5 on the way to a -2. Churchill, you're -8. You're pretty much going to stay there at -7. And Whiteshell, -4 on the way to a -1. Once again, we are -5 in the city of Winnipeg. A couple of quick traffic notes for you. So I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but this is a big one today between 9 and 3 in the afternoon. They're switching things up on the under construction St. Vital Bridge. So expect delays between 9 and 3 because the city's going to be moving all the traffic onto the new southbound bridge to accommodate the new construction work on the northbound side. So there's going to be be delays there as they switch things over. It might be even closed for a little bit. So expect delays in that area or avoid it today. And that's between 9, so after rush hour. Also, some construction southbound Main between Portage and Pioneer. There's curb and middle lanes, some road work. I passed that coming in. And eastbound Logan from Main to Disraeli, some curb lane road work as well. So that could slow you down coming into the city. 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line.
All right. Thanks very much, Pat.
Thank you.
Well, we asked you on Facebook this morning. You can weigh in on our listener line as well about shrinkflation and what you've noticed and if you're changing how you shop because of it, spending the same amount of money on a product, getting less product inside. Chris Swan already wrote in on Facebook saying, yes, struggling everywhere. So I'm thrifting, couponing, food banks, signing up for every app imaginable as well to gain points. So thank you for weighing in, Chris. Well, speaking of how tough it is out there, Chrisley Ramlakan is here with our business report. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So let's start by talking about inflation. It continues to be a drag for so many households, but there's also another financial worry on the horizon now, unfortunately, for Canadians.
Yes, so Canadians are bracing for their mortgage renewals. So a recent report from Royal LePage estimates more than 3 million Canadians have to renew their mortgages in the next year and a half, most at significantly higher rates. So nearly 3/4 say they are worried about the financial hit. Also, Canada's largest bank, RBC, says nearly 3/4 of its mortgages are coming up for renewal over the next 3 years. About 90% due over the next 2 years are fixed rate mortgages with interest rates between 3.1 and 3.6%. And Marcy, the rates offered now are between 5.8 and 7.5%, so much higher. For more on this year's Royce Mendez, who is the managing director and head of macro strategy at Desjardins, he says some borrowers could see their monthly mortgage payments increase by as much as 70%.
It's possible that we're feeling the effects of the pandemic era borrowing all the way out to 2026. Hopefully by 2027, the economy will be in a better place. But a lot of consumption and borrowing was pulled forward during the pandemic when interest rates were very low. And now the Canadian economy is sort of paying the price for that.
Now, the federal government has introduced what it's calling a mortgage charter, guidelines to try to help customers. And it includes measures such as temporarily extending amortization periods, ending a stress test when switching lenders, and allowing lump sum payments to avoid negative amortization without a penalty. But of course, as people have been depleting their savings and credit, some people just are not going to have large chunks of money to put down on their mortgages.
Let's go to another story about an ailing toy retailer, Mastermind, and now it says it's reached a deal to settle the bulk of its business at least. What are the details of this?
Yes, so it's selling to a company associated with 3 big names in the Canadian retail world. The Toronto-based chain has signed an agreement with Unity Acquisitions, a company run by Joe Mimran, Frank Ricchetti, and David Liu. So the deal includes most of the store locations and allow a significant portion of the company's 800 employees to continue with the business. Mimran founded Club Monaco and created the Joe Fresh brand for Loblaw companies. So that's how people might know him. Liu has spent time at Sport Chek and Marks and is chief executive of clothing company Kitten Ace, which the 3 own together. And Mastermind, has really been facing increasing competition, disruptions from the pandemic, and an uncertain economy as consumers spend less. And last month, it filed for creditor protection. For more on this, here's Doug Stevens, who is the founder of Retail Profit.
They could have, just been bought out by private equity and sort of taken apart and sold off in pieces. They could have simply stared down a really ugly liquidation or restructuring that may not have worked out well for them. But I think on the face of it anyway, to be striking a deal with a savvy retailer like Joe Mimran and his group, I think really potentially bodes well for the future of the brand.
Now, the deal is still subject to court approval, but it is expected to close in January. And despite some stores closing, Mastermind says its holiday sales and promotions are still going to continue.
Now, for your final story before we look at markets this morning, Canada's Financial Intelligence Agency has some unsettling news about cryptocurrency.
Yes, well, it's expecting the criminal use of cryptocurrency to grow. So it anticipates criminals will increase their use to raise, move, and hide funds outside of the traditional banking system. The agency known as FinTrack says the most prevalent form of money laundering involving virtual currencies is the movement of proceeds of fraud and ransomware attacks. So businesses that deal in virtual currency are required to register with FinTrack before offering these kinds of services. And it says unregistered money businesses continue to pose challenges for those seeking to detect money laundering and terrorist financing. So last year, it did publish an advisory to try to help businesses and people protect themselves against illicit activities tied to underground banking. And since then, it has actually seen an increase in reports of money laundering associated with underground banking. So FinTrack says underground banking continues to be attractive to international figures looking to evade sanctions or engage in other types of illegal activity, such as terrorist financing.
It's kind of unnerving that they put the warning out. They know it's going to grow, which is like saying we're not sure, get ahead of it, of getting a handle on it. So we'll see what happens in the upcoming year. What's going on in the markets this morning, Crystalie?
So in Europe, markets are mixed as some of the momentum that powered a stellar month subsides. Germany is up, the UK is down, France is up. In Asia, markets are sliding as investors assess a slew of economic data from across the region. Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is down 14 cents to 72.87 US per barrel. Gold is up 10 cents to $2,042.60 US per ounce. And the dollar is down almost a quarter of a cent to 73.65 cents US.
All right. Thank you very much, Crystalie. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Marcy.
With our business report, that's Crystalie Ramlakan. It is 6:47 a.m. on your Tuesday morning. I'm Marcy Markusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. It's -5 in Winnipeg. It's cloudy. It's going to be around -1 today. We are expecting a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon. If you need us in traffic, give us a call, 788-3093. Well, it is seems to be an hour of talking about finances and how you're managing out there. It includes what you're doing in terms of budgeting for the holidays. Our personal finance columnist, Rabina Ahmed Huq, this morning says that this year Canadians are reining in spending as cost of living expenses continue to rise.
Have you started preparing for the holidays? If not, it may be time in order to save the most money and stress. Experts say starting early helps us stay on budget. A new survey shows Canadians are planning on cutting back on holiday spending. The 2023 Holiday Retail Outlook from consulting firm Deloitte Canada shows Canadians are feeling cautious amid economic challenges this season and will spend 11% less this year compared to 2022.
I think that's true. I think everyone is tightening their purse strings, and with good reason. The cost of things have increased dramatically over the last couple of years.
Carrie Hayes is a cash flow expert and budgeting coach. She runs the site betterbudgets.ca. Hayes says Canadians feeling financially strained can make decisions now that will help them stay on budget for the remainder of the year. She says many shoppers just resign themselves to the holidays being expensive, but that's not true.
I think one thing that puts a lot of us over budget is internalizing this idea that it's normal and okay to go into an excess over the holidays. I think there's this perception that people can and should use credit cards and store repayment plans to shop for the holidays. I would challenge listeners to take a hard look at the real numbers in their account and stick to that if possible. That may cause you to feel a pinch before Christmas, but in my opinion, it's better to feel the pinch now instead of feeling the same pinch later, but with interest added onto it.
Hayes says planning for the holidays starts with knowing how much you can spend. That number may be different than the national average, which Deloitte says is $1,347, or it might be less than what you spent last year. But your budget is dictated by what you can afford, not what someone tells you to spend.
Yeah, I think there's been increased pressure to consume in recent years, which has put more pressure on gift giving. I would challenge people to be more budget savvy and pare back the list of people you want to regularly give gifts to. Consider replacing the gifts you might have purchased with something like home-based or home-baked goods, or agreeing with a family member to forgo gift giving entirely.
Jessica Morehouse is a financial counselor and host of the More Money podcast. She says the work of making a holiday budget only has to happen the first time.
The good thing is once you do figure out how to make your holiday budget, you can really keep on using it for future years and just make some tweaks.
If you've never made a holiday budget, start by listing all the people you want to buy for. Include family, friends, colleagues, neighbors. Assign a dollar amount to each person. Then list the number of events you anticipate attending and hosting and attach a dollar figure to that too. Also list any travel you may be doing during the holidays. Often, this is the most expensive item in your budget. Morehouse says doing the work now will avoid you receiving a bloated credit card bill in January.
No one wants to start the year being like, oh gosh, I have a, credit card debt to pay off.
Budgeting expert Hayes says there are ways you can spend no money this holiday season. She plays a game with friends similar to Secret Santa. But the difference is the gift has to be something interesting you already have at home. Hayes says the game is funny and light and everyone goes home with a unique gift. The best part, nobody spent any money. She recommends thinking of ways to cut out spending this holiday season and focus more on being together. For CBC Radio, I'm Rubina Ahmed-Haq.
Right now, it is 9 minutes to 7 o'clock on your Tuesday morning. You are listening to CBC. I'm Marcy Markusa with our team here at the show. Thanks for joining us. Currently in the city, cloudy -5. If you need us on the drive, 788-3093. It was just a little greasy on my way in. Well, the Assembly of First Nations is set to elect a new leader this week. It's been an eventful 18 months, to say the least, for the organization, with complaints of misconduct and resignations. The AFN's previous national chief, Roseanne Archibald, was ousted this past June. Members are hopeful this election for a new national chief will help the organization turn a corner. Joining us to talk about it, Niigaan Sinclair. Niigaan is Anishinaabe Associate Professor of Native Studies at the University of Manitoba. And great to have you with us. Hi.
Hey, Marcy. Nice to be here.
So obviously we have two people from Manitoba, Sheila North and Cindy Woodhouse, who have their names in the ring to run. We'll talk about them in a moment. But I just want to sort of figure out where the starting point is. I mentioned all the turmoil. What kind of impact has that had on the effectiveness of the AFN in your view?
The AFN has been paralyzed for about 18 months in this leadership conflict between regional chiefs who represent provinces and arguably some staff who support them, and then the National Chief's Office, which is now vacant because the regional chiefs, the provincial leaders, voted in an online vote, a very controversial online vote, to remove the National Chief. And so the AFN's been with an interim chief, that's Regional Chief Joanna Bernard from New Brunswick, who's been sort of spearheading or navigating the organization, but it's really been paralyzed. And it still has this lingering residue from the conflict between the regional chiefs and the national chief over the issue of financial improprieties in the organization going back to former National Chief Perry Bellegarde's time in office. Those questions have never been addressed. While there's been some legitimate stuff around whether, former National Chief Roseanne Archibald, that whether she was removed or not, it was around bullying and harassment of staff. There was a third-party report. But what's happened is that the AFN has really been paralyzed. It just hasn't been able to deal with some issues, anything to do with the federal government, what it's supposed to be doing, which is advocating for chiefs. But what's instead happened is that this leadership fight has just dominated every single meeting, whether it's in Halifax or whether it's in BC or whether it's this week in Ottawa. That's all anyone ever talks about.
So obviously, whoever is the new leader is going to have to answer some questions, dig into some of those questions internally, but then also hopefully, as you were saying, do what the AFN is supposed to be doing. To that end, what do you think the major issues are that an incoming leader is going to have to take on?
Well, the biggest issue really is, should the AFN exist? Because the AFN for a long time has been criticized as too big, too politicized, too distant from the interest of individual First Nations people. Does it represent chiefs, for example, in BC where they're still negotiating treaties, or in the Maritimes where they're talking about an issue of treaty rights when it comes to lobster fishing, or in Manitoba, of course, we have the issue on murder, missing, abused women and girls, final inquiry, calls for justice. That's something that is of deep concern and interest to First Nations in Manitoba. And how do you get any national chief to bring all of those kind of issues to the forefront together? The people who really care the most about this election might not be First Nations individuals. It might be the federal government, because the federal government needs the AFN to exist. They would much rather deal with one voice, one national chief, than deal with 630, 640 different First Nations individual chiefs. And so the federal government might be the person who cares the most about this election. But what really is the issue here is, if the AFN is going to exist, how can it get back on track? How can it have a message of unity, or a message in which chiefs can come together to make resolutions and have those resolutions delivered by the leadership within the organization?
To the front runners in the race, I mentioned 2 Manitobans in the race. There's 6 in total in the race. What's your sense of the race so far?
It's hard to tell because, it's a convention-like atmosphere in Ottawa this week. So, what is a convention like? Anyone who watches these things on TV knows that it's about the momentum on the floor. It's about the speeches people give that day versus the policy. Chiefs might be more swayed by what someone says in Ottawa this week versus looking at their platform. But that being said, the front runner, I think, is Reginald Belrose from Saskatchewan. He's the former chief of his community, 17 years, 2 decades. He's running under a platform of unifying the organization, bringing back Alberta, who has completely abandoned, segments of Alberta have completely abandoned the AFN. They don't even come to meetings anymore. And he was also the runner-up to Archibald in 2021. So he's a lot of bedrock support. Reginald Belrose is Saskatchewan. But, of course, the 2 women from Manitoba, who I think we all know, our listeners here. The first is Cindy Woodhouse. She's well known for being the regional chief of Manitoba. She spearheaded a $23 billion settlement, so she has certainly a track record to show evidence that she's able to get work done with the federal government. Sheila North is a former CBC reporter, a former Grand Chief of Northern Manitoba. She came second in the 2018 election and has still some of that support going back, back to before the pandemic. Those 3 frontrunners are probably going to get the most amount of support, but like I said, in a convention-like environment, who will offer support, who will concede, what will happen, who will make promises in the different... If you ever go to these elections, the most interesting thing that you can be a part of is go to the different provincial rooms. There'll be a certain room just for the Manitoba Chiefs, for the Saskatchewan Chiefs, for the BC Chiefs. What happens in those rooms, the candidates will walk in and they'll make promises very specifically in closed-door meetings there. Media aren't often allowed to participate in some of those. I've been in those meetings previously, but before I was a member of the media. It is fascinating to watch the way that promises take place in those rooms. Because
they're jockeying to see if I lose support or someone falls off the ballot, will you go behind me? Like, there's so much jockeying in the moment. We'll have to leave our conversation there this morning, Nigon. Thank you for the analysis. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Miigwech, thanks so much.
Nigon Sinclair, Anishinaabe columnist and commentator, also an associate professor of Native Studies here at the University of Winnipeg. 3 minutes to 7 o'clock. Let's continue with the news and get some analysis of the stories making news today. Here's your headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg retailers are coping with a huge increase in theft. Police say retail theft is 44% higher for the first half of this year compared to last year. And they say they are targeting enforcement, especially in the lead up to Christmas. We're going to hear from a downtown Winnipeg grocer and the measures he's taking to try to get a handle on this. In our next local news, we'll have his opinions coming up. As well, a Manitoba town's grief in the wake of a teen's brutal murder more than 30 years ago is at the heart of a new docu-film. Altona debuted and won an award at the Whistler Film Festival over the weekend. Your next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
It is cloudy, -5. Today, -1 is our daytime high. We could see some morning patchy fog. We're not hearing any major reports, but we're supposed to have a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon, according to the forecast, and some light wind in Winnipeg. If you need us on the drive, 788-3093. Could be a touch greasy out there, but otherwise pretty straight ahead. But give us a call if you need on the morning commute. In the next hour of Information Radio, we also are going to hear more about that story Heather just mentioned, the documentary simply titled Altona. We have a full interview coming up, and we'll also hear part of the trailer as well for this work. That is right at 10 after 7 this morning. In addition, in the next hour of the show, we'll find out why a member of our local Jamaican community thinks it's high time that Jamaica removes English as its official language, perhaps making way for patois. Stay tuned, that's coming up. And at 10 to 8, as you've been hearing in the news over the last 24 hours, the jobs are now posted for Winnipeg's new transit safety officers. But what do those jobs entail? We're going to talk to the head of transit security about the training involved and how many officers you can expect to see on the bus in the new year. I'm Marcy Markusa. This is CBC. Reach out anytime. 788-3205 is the listener line. And World Report's coming up next. Stay with us.
Today on The Current.
I do like working from home. Sometimes I like going to the office, but I like working from home.
As more people work from home, there are questions around what to do with all those empty office spaces. Some cities are turning them into homes to help with the housing crisis, but architects say it's not always easy. It's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. Aid groups in Gaza say it's getting harder to help. An official with the United Nations is warning an even more hellish scenario could unfold in the region. And in that case, humanitarian operations may not be able to respond. The CBC's Margaret Evans is in Jerusalem with the latest on the Israel-Hamas war.
Human misery in motion. Ambulances arriving at the Nasser hospital in Han Yunis after another night of Israeli bombing. Its ground invasion in pursuit of Hamas also moving closer to the southern city many Gazans had earlier fled to in search of shelter. The Israeli military issued new evacuation orders for parts of Han Yunis yesterday, and residents say Israeli tanks have now cut Salahadin Road, the main artery to northern Gaza. The president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Mirjana Spoljaric, visited the city yesterday.
What shocked me the most were the children with atrocious injuries and at the same time having lost their parents with no one looking after them.
Aid agencies say about 100 trucks carrying humanitarian aid crossed into Gaza Monday. Spoljaric says it won't change the situation on the ground.
We are facing a situation here that will not be healed by sending in more trucks. We need to provide protection to the civilians in Gaza that have nowhere to go.
She also called on the international community to protect the rights of Palestinian detainees and the Israeli hostages still being held in Gaza. 8 Israeli hostages who've been released have written to Spoljaric asking the Red Cross to do more to secure the release of those still held and to demand access to them. The families of the remaining hostages have also demanded a meeting with Israel's war cabinet, scheduled for later today. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
First Nations chiefs are gathering in Ottawa for a crucial vote. Over the next couple of days, hundreds of members of the country's Indigenous communities will pick a new leader. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, an important issue for many of the candidates focuses on a dark period of Canadian history.
Me, myself, I'm a 60 scoop survivor myself.
Cornell McLean is the chief of Lake Manitoba First Nation. He's behind a resolution calling for a national inquiry into the 60 scoop, a practice from the 1950s until the early 1990s, when more than 20,000 Indigenous children were taken from their homes and placed with non-Indigenous families.
And there's lots of people out there that are still wondering who their families are, wondering who their communities are.
Cindy Woodhouse says she supports the call, a position she shares with the other 5 candidates vying to become the next national chief of the Assembly of First Nations.
I support it because we are in a reconciliation process with Canada.
Dean Sayers is running for the top job, along with David Pratt, who says an inquiry would address a crisis that continues today.
We have more children in child welfare right now in care of the provinces and territories social services system than at the height of the residential school.
Sheila North is running for national chief a second time. She says she supports the issue, but doesn't want to see a repeat of past inquiries where recommendations sit on a shelf.
And if there is one for a 60 scoop, I hope that going forward we'll start to build in the implementation plan ahead of time.
An inquiry could be at the top of the next national chief's to-do list after the ballots are cast tomorrow. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
There's also a large gathering of Canada's Indigenous in Dubai right now for the COP28 summit. The delegates from across the country say they want a bigger seat at the table, especially when the climate talks turn to solutions. Kyle Bax has that story.
Indigenous leaders from across Canada describe how climate change is impacting their lives, from no more salmon in a BC river to no more caribou in parts of the prairies. They're on a stage at the UN climate talks in Dubai, hoping their words will have an effect.
It literally impacts everything we do.
Dane D'Souza is with the Métis National Council. He made the trip from Manitoba to Dubai.
It impacts how we gather at our tables as a family. It impacts how we pass along our knowledge and our memories to our children. It impacts how we live. It impacts how we exist. And it impacts how we enjoy life in Canada.
There are several dozen Indigenous representatives from Canada at the climate talks, including youth representatives, elders, and business leaders.
We have climate initiatives that we need to be very cognizant of.
Karen Ogan is with the First Nations LNG Alliance. She supports resource development in Canada.
It's important for our First Nations that are continuously having to manage poverty. And we want to be able to start to manage prosperity.
For D'Souza, the Métis leader, he says Indigenous groups want to play a bigger role.
What's missing from the conversation is the reality that our solutions are being ignored, our abilities to prevent losses and damages.
He hopes their presence here will make their voice stronger. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Dubai.
Alberta is doubling down in its rejection of Ottawa's new methane rules. The plan will almost completely ban the controlled release or burning of the gas before the end of the decade. The province says it's refusing to implement the regulations. At the COP28 summit, Alberta's Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz says the issue is a provincial matter, not a federal one.
We were able to meet our targets for 2025 by doing things our own way, managing that provincially, working with industry. And in fact, we did that with far less cost to industry, saving $600 million.
Schultz is in Dubai with delegates from Alberta, including Premier Daniel Smith, Canada's Environment Minister, announced the new rules at the summit yesterday. They will set targets to cut methane leaks and releases by the oil and gas industry by at least 75% compared to 2012 levels. Britain's Home Secretary is in Rwanda today. He's there to sign a treaty with the East African nation on his government's asylum plan.
I mean, it's painful to watch. It's painful to see that.
James Cleverly visited the Kigali Genocide Memorial shortly after arriving. The deportation scheme would see thousands of asylum seekers rerouted from Britain's shores to Rwanda. In return, Rwanda receives more than $200 million in funding. The plan is at the center of Britain's strategy to cut migration. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will address U.S. senators later today. The Biden administration invited Zelensky to the classified meeting on funding for the war. That move is being seen as sending Congress a message about the need to approve tens of billions of dollars in military and economic assistance. As it stands, the U.S. will run out of funding to help Ukraine by the end of this year. There's a buzz this morning surrounding a well-known brand of cereal and a case of alleged shrinkflation. CBC News has found some boxes of Cheerios are missing some of the key ingredient, the Cheerios. Sophia Harris reports.
Each box says 1 kilogram on each side.
Paul J. just assumed each box of his multi-grain Cheerios Jumbo 2-pack weighed 1 kilogram because that's what it says on each box. But something didn't feel right. Curious, he weighed the 2-pack.
Realizing that the 1 kilogram box doesn't contain 1 kilogram.
Turns out the cereal in each box weighs around 500 grams. And that 1 kilogram label on each box is actually the total weight of both boxes combined. A missing detail.
You should make it clear to customers who are buying your product exactly what weight they're getting.
Jay complained to General Mills, the makers of Cheerios, in July. The company told him it considered his case an isolated incident.
Really, their email kind of sort of shut me down and said, no, it's isolated.
But it's not. CBC News visited a major grocery store in Toronto on Monday. All the multigrain and Honey Nut Cheerios 2-packs on the shelves had the flawed weight labels.
Should have been corrected fairly quickly.
Food industry consultant Walter Dolomon has viewed the packaging.
It's misleading to consumers, and the law is very clear that the labels may not be misleading.
Dissatisfied with General Mills' response, customer J complained to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency in August. It has received 2 complaints and is investigating. General Mills says it started work on a fix in September and has expedited the lengthy process to produce correct packaging, which will arrive in stores this month. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, hello, everybody, and good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Markusa, live downtown in Winnipeg. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the CBC Listen app. Or maybe you're watching on YouTube. Wherever you're tuned in and however you're tuned in, thanks for joining us this morning. Coming up on 89.3, we're going to be talking about a documentary that is coming out. A true crime documentary. It focuses on a deadly attack that happened in Altona. It is, in fact, now streaming. The documentary was created, though, by 4 brothers from BC. So we'll talk to 2 of them about what brought them to Manitoba and why they made this documentary about a crime that took the life of a man from Altona, a teenager, rather, from Altona, on November 17th, 1990. In addition, this hour, we'll find out why a member of our local Jamaican community thinks it's high time that Jamaica removes the English as its official language. Maybe it will be replaced with patois. I love that I read the English and I didn't say English properly in a story about language. Pardon me, everyone. Also, at 10 to 8 this morning, I want to mention the jobs have now been posted. We're going to get an update today on the city's plan to hire at least 20 safety officers on transit buses in the new year. So we're going to hear from the head of the new transit security force now that those job descriptions are out. Right now, let's turn to Heather Wells at 11 minutes past 7 o'clock for other headlines. Hi.
Hi there. Well, Winnipeg retailers say they are doing what they can to deter thieves. Police say retail theft is 44% higher for the first half of this year compared to last year. At Family Foods downtown, owner Kevin Schmidt says some people are brazen enough to steal an entire basket of groceries. We're going to hear the measures he takes to try to stop them. Premier Wab Kinew says Manitoba can't just stop collecting the federal carbon tax on home heating. The Premier unveiled a legal opinion yesterday to that effect, but that's what Manitoba's opposition PCs want the NDP government to do. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
So I have to say, Pat, Abby's making you look really bad, eh?
Again?
Again, yeah.
Okay.
Look at that shirt he's got on this morning.
So yesterday was the rubber duck shirt. Today it is the Tyrannosaurus Rex Christmas shirt.
Yeah.
Nicely done. Yep.
You got to go on YouTube to check that out.
And I'm just wearing like a plaid flannel type.
Well, he's
thing
showing
over a
both of
dress
us up. I'm wearing a black sweater, but he's in the spirit.
I think having worked with me for a long time, Marcy, you'll know fashion's never been my thing, especially at 4 in the morning.
Let's get into the forecast here. That is your thing. What do we know?
Well, we're -5 right now in the downtown, and I'm looking at satellite imagery. A lot of cloud cover over most of the province, except lighter cloud kind of up Dauphin down to Brandon looks a little bit more clear. But looking at Saskatchewan right now, there's a whole other wave of cloud cover that's going to come in a little while. Now, the forecast for Brandon today is a mix of sun and cloud, and this -7 that is happening right now with some freezing fog being reported is going to go to a high of +1 for Brandon. And here in Winnipeg, -5 right now, and we expect today to see a mix of sun and cloud as well. And that -5 right now will improve to a -1. And then tonight, -4. That's all. Shouldn't have to plug in the vehicles at -4. Tomorrow is the bit of an oddball, 7 in the sunshine. That's on the plus side, folks, not the minus side. And then on Thursday, a +6. Now, John Sauter, our meteorologist here at CBC Manitoba, says we could see some rain beginning overnight into Friday morning. So Thursday into Friday morning, some rain. Could be some wet flurries by Friday, and then we're at a +1. And a little bit colder for the weekend, more normal, -6 and -9 for Saturday and Sunday. The average daytime high for this this time of year is -8, and the average overnight low is -17. So you can see we're nowhere near that. Once again, we're -5 in the downtown with some cloud cover. Sun rises this morning at 8:08, by the way, and sets at 4:29. In traffic, 788-3093. No major incidents to report at 7:14 in the morning, but I'll just mention this again. As of 9 o'clock this morning, between 9 and 3, expect some delays on the St. Vital Bridge. Construction is done on the westernmost side, and that is basically the traffic that goes southbound. For the past several months, construction has been happening on that span. Well, we're going to switch things up today because that's done. So basically, you'll be going over. That's going to be one lane open each way once they make the switch on that new side, the new construction that's done on there, and then they're going to get going on the other span. So that's what's happening today between 9 o'clock this morning and 3. So expect delays in that St. Vital Bridge area. That number again for traffic to reach me, 788-3093.
Well, as you may have heard in the news, 4 brothers from British Columbia have created a documentary about a murder in Altona. The documentary, simply titled Altona, is about an incident that you might have lived through. It left one teenage boy dead and another severely injured on November 17th back in 1990. The documentary showcases how the case impacted the entire community forever. Here's a clip from the doc and a warning that it is by its nature very disturbing.
I often describe what happened that night as a lightning strike. Some individuals were struck by lightning. Some individuals saw the lightning bolt strike, but the whole community heard the thunder.
I've done hundreds of stories, and this one in Altona really was, frankly, probably every parent's nightmare.
Tyler invited school friend Curtis Klassen to stay the night. At midnight, a kid from school named Earl Giesbrecht knocked on the door.
Curtis was killed. Earl slit Tyler's throat.
Doused it with gasoline, set him on fire. Yeah, Tyler was alive.
This documentary, Altona, features interviews with Tyler Pelkey as well as with others who were involved in this horrific story out of Altona. Heath and Thomas Afalter are 2 of the creators of the true crime documentary. Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
Hi, Heath. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, Marcy. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
So, Thomas, a lot of people in this province lived through this. But for those that did not and don't know the full story of what happened, can you share just briefly what the documentary covers?
Absolutely. It covers an incident that happened on November 17th, 1990, wherein Curtis Klassen and Tyler Pelkey, who were both teenagers at the time, were having a sleepover. They had a hockey tournament the next day, and as it happened, Tyler's mom, Robin, was out of town that weekend, so the 2 boys were staying at Tyler's house by themselves. Another boy from the community named Earl Giesbrecht, who was older than them, I believe he was 17 at the time, showed up uninvited and ended up essentially attacking both Tyler and Curtis. And Curtis was tragically killed. He was murdered by Earl. And Tyler had his throat slit and was literally set on fire. And then the rest of his house was set on fire as well. Miraculously, against all odds, Tyler was able to escape.
And that's that haunting doorbell we hear in your trailer. Literally crawled and rang the doorbell.
Yeah, and he went, so the event itself is very harrowing, but then the documentary goes on to cover much more of the real world sort of human impact of this event. It's set up as a true crime piece, but essentially evolves into a story about trauma recovery and even forgiveness.
So let me interject there for a moment and just turn to your brother. Heath, I mean, you guys, I mentioned, are from BC. You, in fact, found out about this story from Altona because of Tyler. Is that right?
Yeah, Tyler now he does public speaking events on the subjects of forgiveness and thriving through adversity. And just by pure happenstance, I happened to be in the audience of one of his talks one day, and I was just absolutely blown away by his story of recovery and forgiveness and how he was able to turn his life into, a positive message for others to give hope about how people can recover from traumatic events like this. So,
What speaks to the care in which you two approach this? Heath, I understand you guys didn't film right away. You approached Tyler thinking, and talked to him after the talk. How long did you wait before, you did start filming until Tyler was ready to share the story in this way?
from the point that I first heard it from Tyler's mouth to when we started shooting was over 10 years. It was, I think, probably 12 or 13 years. Yeah, it was a very long process of just like talking to him, kind of like giving our intentions of what we wanted to do with the film. I mean, we were quite young and fresh out of film school when I first heard the story too. So that was part of it as well, as like our own careers evolving and sort of Tyler watching the stuff that we were making and sort of beginning to trust that we were going to tell this story with a sense of integrity. And what we have found is this is a much more nuanced story of humanity, and it's not about the black and the white. It's all about the gray area in between.
Thomas, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to be in Altona to film this? How did people react when you were in town filming this?
Being in Altona was very much like being in the town where we all grew up. All four of us brothers grew up in a very small town as well, in BC, not in Manitoba, but all small Canadian towns are, there's a lot of connective tissue there. A lot of them are very similar. I think we found very quickly that there's a full spectrum of reactions to this project and to what we were doing. There are people in Altona that don't want to be a part of this documentary and don't really want to talk about the story anymore because naturally they were terribly traumatized by it 30 years ago, and they just don't want it brought back up again, and that's totally understandable. We can empathize with that completely, but on the flip side, there's also people that fully support the documentary and want this story to be told, not just because of Tyler's sake and telling his sort of inspirational life journey, but also Corey Wall, Cam Wall, friends of Tyler and Curtis who were there, and they're also featured in the documentary, and they both also have stories to tell here. They've been on a journey themselves, and of course, Millie Klassen, who's Curtis's mother, she still lives in Altona, and she very graciously, very courageously agreed to be a part of this documentary and be interviewed for it. And, she again wants to honor her son, and hopefully, best case scenario, the film is seen by people who are dealing with things in their own lives and helps them perhaps ask him questions or look internally and hopefully maybe heal.
It's interesting. I asked the question in part also because I know there are people in Altona that are younger that say that they'd never even heard of this happening. So whether that was just age or deliberately not being shared, or maybe a blend of both, is for people in Altona to know.
For sure.
I want to ask you, you also interview Earl Giesbrecht, the convicted murderer, for this. What was it like to interview Earl?
Well, it was a year-long process to get a hold of Earl. As it happens in the film, Earl did not want to speak on camera because of his identity, wanting to respect his identity not being revealed, his face and his voice, etc. So
because he's out on parole since 2020, Manitoba audience might know. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he's out on parole. So, and we had to respect that. So what happened was our producer Craig did a sit-down interview with him, and then from that, we got a transcript, essentially a statement from Earl, and then have that read by an actor in the film, his perspective, which is honestly a bit of a Rorschach test. Of the audiences that have seen the film, some people have very different reactions to what Earl has to say, and it ends up being, I think, a lot reflection of who you are as an individual and how you feel about Earl, any sort of preconceived notions you might have about forgiveness and about crime and justice, and these sorts of ideas kind of all play into people's reactions to what Earl has to say.
What's the goal with the film? I think this was originally going to be called Pelkey after Tyler, and then you switched it, realizing the impact on the wider community. But what is the goal with the film overall?
I guess there's sort of two sides of that. I mean, the goal from the film aspect is we just premiered at the Whistler Film Festival, and we actually won the Best Documentary Award at the festival. We found out yesterday, so that was a huge honor. But from here, it's going to be basically trying to get it to streamers and broadcasters so that it can be shared with a larger audience, and which I think is more sort of like our underlying goal of the film is just that we can share this incredible story of healing and trauma recovery with a larger audience, and in hopes that there are people that, yeah, like Thomas mentioned, maybe struggling with some things in their own life right now, which maybe Tyler's story will be something that can inspire them and, let them know that tomorrow can always be better than today.
Thank you both, and congratulations on your win at Whistler, and appreciate having you on CBC. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Heath and Thomas Falter, they are two brothers, four from BC, that created a true crime documentary called Altona. As you heard, it recently premiered and won an award at the Whistler Film Festival. I spoke with them via Zoom yesterday. It is 7:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. I'm Marcy Markusa. Thanks for being with us today. Cloudy day ahead, -5. Over in Brandon, there's some freezing fog right now. You're sitting at -7. And up in Thompson, it's misty and it's -7 as well. Well, let's talk about last night. What a game for the Jets goalie. Scott Reguera is here to walk through that and other things in morning sports. Hi to you.
Hey there, Marcy.
He was standing on his head. He was a wall. Pat was describing, the beginning of the game, and it was crazy that they didn't score, but Carolina didn't get it in the net until later in the game. Amazing.
Yeah, onslaught from the Hurricanes. Laurent Brossoit, not Connor Hellebuck is who we're talking about in the net for Winnipeg. He was awesome. He stopped 42 of the 43 shots he faced, much to the delight of his coach, Rick Bowness.
Listen, that was the reason we signed him. He was the difference. There's no question. Yeah, but again, you're not going to beat that team without great goaltending, and LB certainly gave us that tonight, but that was his best game by far.
Away from the ice, Marcy, the team announced a 3-year contract extension for Nino Niederreiter. The Swiss winger has formed one of the highest scoring lines in the league this season alongside Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton. So we'll see if that line can continue its success as they take on the Avalanche tomorrow evening in Colorado.
Fun stuff. Let's go to soccer now. What are you expecting from Christine Sinclair as she plays her final match for Canada tonight?
Yeah, against Australia in front of 45,000 fans at BC Place, which has been renamed Christine Sinclair Place for the evening. I expect something special from her. She always, Marcy, seems to rise to the occasion. I think of that free kick goal she scored to open up the 2011 World Cup against the Germans in Berlin, or that 300th cap at the Tokyo Olympics, where again she scored against the hosts, Japan in that case. And I just have a hunch she's going to play a role in her own fairy tale ending tonight. Her coach, Bev Priestman, certainly sounds invested in making that happen.
She delivers in big moments. So listen, I know the team will do anything, probably pass her the ball even if there's a wide open net, to do anything to get that last goal for her. But you know what? I can't imagine she's going to change anything. Knowing what she does, she'll turn up, do her role, be selfless, and lead this team out for one last time. And I think that's going to be really special.
We shall see, and I choose those words purposefully, Marcy, because it boggles the mind how few of Sinclair's 190 career goals Canadians have actually got to see over the years. Well, Olympic and World Cups aside, there's just been so little coverage. That will not be the case tonight. Sinclair's last match for Canada will be televised. It's on TSN, and will kick off at 7 Central Time.
So, as you've been talking about her career, tonight really caps off 22 years, her international career, her Olympic career. How do you view her legacy, Christine Sinclair?
Well, for me, Marcy, she's the country's best athlete of this century, with the utmost respect for Olympic greats like Andre DeGrasse and Penny Oleksiak, hockey icons Hayley Wickenheiser and Connor McDavid, and two-time NBA MVP Steve Nash. It's Sinclair that's had the biggest impact since the year 2000. Prior to her arrival, soccer was not on many Canadian sports fans' radars. After Sinclair's heroics, especially that legendary Olympic hat-trick against the Americans at Old Trafford in Manchester, footy is not just the most played Canadian sport, but now among the most watched as well. And this is something, Marcy, that Christine Sinclair always hoped for. She was asked her advice for young girls contemplating playing the sport, and here's what she said.
Honestly, just dream and go for it. all the players on the national team. We were once that young kid that had aspirations and dreams of playing professionally and representing Canada at World Cups and Olympics. And there's no secret. It's a lot of work, but man, it's the best job in the world. And yeah, just to go for it. Anything's possible.
Wise words.
Can I just say on behalf of, like, just as a woman, this is me purely personally speaking, but the line for me where I really admired her more than I, as an athlete always admired her, but is when she was doing some negotiations and that meeting happened and she came out publicly and said that one of the people at the head of soccer said, "What's Christine bitching about?"
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Nick
And then she
Bontis
came
is
out
the
with
guy,
that.
yeah.
And I just thought, and then she stood in that moment and she just said it as a fact and moved on. And it was so illustrative. And I thought about her whole career in totality and how many comments she probably faced over the years and then where she'd come from and where she's going. And so deep congratulations to her.
She's always seen the bigger picture. She wants to be a coach going forward because she just loves the game and not the red tape and the garbage so often around it.
Yeah.
But just think of what a face she'd be ahead of the Canadian Soccer Association in the future, or Canada Soccer as it's known. She certainly would get my vote.
We will see. All right. Thank you.
You bet. And it's 8 o'clock Central tonight. I got the time wrong.
All right. 8 o'clock Central. Thanks very much, Scott.
You bet.
Scott Reguer with Morning Sports. A quick commuter note. Kyle called the traffic line, Highway 83 between Melita and Verdun. We've got thick fog now. So thanks for the call, Kyle. There's also freezing fog now being reported in Brandon. So parts of Westman could be dealing with that this morning. Some patchy fog causing incident. 788-3093 if you do need to reach us with any other updates on your commute. Still ahead, find out why a member of our local Jamaican community thinks it's high time Jamaica removes English as its official language. We'll hear that after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -5 in Winnipeg. And again, we start the day with a little bit of patchy fog, more if you are in western Manitoba. And then a mix of sun and clouds in Winnipeg. Today's high is -1. Winnipeg retailers are grappling with a spike in theft. At Family Foods downtown, owner Kevin Schmidt says theft is going up. Police say retail theft is 44% higher for the first half of this year compared to last year. They say they are targeting enforcement, especially in the lead up to Christmas. Schmidt says some of the people who are shoplifting are brazen enough to walk out with a full basket of groceries.
There's nothing we can do. Some staff will step up and do things. I don't like when that happens because I do fear that something bad could come out of it because you don't know if someone is carrying a weapon.
Schmidt has placed stickers on higher priced items like meat and health and beauty products. They'll send off a sensor at the door. And Schmidt welcomes the help of police, but says it's not worth it for him to report every little theft to help police track trends. Premier Wab Kinew says Manitoba can't just stop collecting the federal carbon tax on some home heating. The Premier unveiled a legal opinion yesterday saying Manitoba cannot just stop collecting and remitting that tax. But that is what Manitoba's opposition PCs want the NDP government to do. The PCs have said since the start of the fall election campaign, they have a favourable legal opinion of their own. Yesterday, Wab Kinew challenged the Tories to produce that opinion.
The PCs went to the people of Manitoba and said that they had a legal opinion about the carbon tax. We simply want to know where it is so that we can have an informed participation in this important debate on affordability.
PC energy critic Grant Jackson says the carbon tax has already lost in the court of public opinion. He says Manitoba should have the courage to simply stop collecting the tax like Saskatchewan plans to do next month. A new documentary looks at how a grisly murder devastated a rural Manitoba town more than 30 years ago.
The whole community heard the thunder.
Altona was written and directed by the four Affolter brothers from British Columbia. It is named after the small town where two teens were tied up, assaulted, and left to die in a burning house on November 17, 1990. Heath Affolter says he learned the story behind Altona by chance after listening to Tyler Pelkey detail his survival of the attack at an event more than a decade ago.
I was just absolutely blown away by his story of recovery and forgiveness and how he was able to turn his life into, a positive message for others to give hope.
The film debuted and won an award at the Whistler Film Festival over the weekend. To the Mideast, where the Israeli military is intensifying its campaign in southern Gaza. The scene overnight at the Nasser Hospital in Han Yunis, the second largest city in Gaza. Israeli tanks and troops are massed at the outskirts of the city, with military officials issuing evacuation orders for a growing number of neighborhoods. Most of those areas are overcrowded with displaced people who have fled the south in recent weeks, and now they're on the move again. James Elder is with UNICEF.
It's so packed, it's so densely populated before all of this. Now you've got 1.8 million people displaced. Anything that is thrown in there, any explosive has to hit someone or something. There is a degree now of horror and fear in people that has taken root on the streets. You know, people stop you and plead for water or, take me with you. It is a level of alarm and anxiety that I've never seen before.
You can hear the latest on Gaza and other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A Winnipeg man accused of giving cannabis candies to trick-or-treaters on last Halloween no longer faces prosecution. The charges against Sheldon Chochinov have been stayed. Chochinov was one of two people charged after police said they got more than a dozen reports of the cannabis candies being handed out in a South Tuxedo neighborhood. Police said children who received the edibles were between 6 and 16. Chochinov's co-accused, Tammy Sigurder, pleaded guilty in September to inadvertently handing out the candies. Chochinov's lawyer told a judge his client has no knowledge of possessing any illegal substances. The Public Prosecution Service of Canada said the charges against Chochinov were stayed because the case no longer met the threshold for prosecution. A bit of sharpshooting helped the Winnipeg Jets secure the win last night.
Dealers, top shelf goal!
Top shelf. Nikolai Ehlers having some fun there in the second period on Sportsnet as the Jets edged the Hurricanes 2-1. But it was Winnipeg goalie Laurent Brossoit who really saved the day with 42 saves. Head coach Rick Bowness says Brossoit was just what they needed to get that win.
He was the difference. There's no question. Yeah, but again, you're not going to beat that team without great goaltending, and LB certainly gave us that tonight, but that was his best game by far.
The Winnipeg Jets hit the road now for 4 games. First up is Colorado on Thursday. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
It is 7:36 a.m. Pat Canuga's back with our regional forecast now from CBC Manitoba.
Some more plus temperatures for you today in parts of the province. I'll get to that in a second. Winnipeg, not quite, but almost. -1 the daytime high. We're at -5 right now. We are going to see some cloud cover. There's some cloud cover right now. We'll see more of it when the sun rises at 8:08 this morning. And we expect to see a mix of sun and cloud. I'm looking at the satellite images right now. Lots of cloud cover over I'd say 2/3 of the province. Southwest corner looks the best as far as clearing skies right now, but we've heard about fog patches as well in that part of the province, which I'll get to again in a second. I'll continue the Winnipeg forecast here. So after that -1 today, we will get to a -4 only overnight tomorrow. Sunny and 7. Yes, a +7 tomorrow. Thursday, a +6, but then we could see some rain, yes, rain, on Thursday night into Friday morning, and we could see some wet snow on the commute Friday morning. That's a few days off in the distance, so we'll enjoy these balmy temperatures right now. And over in Brandon, -7 on the way to a +1 today, and there are some fog patches. We got a call from Kyle between Melita and Verdon on Highway 83, said there's very, very thick fog in that area, and he was doing about 80, and he could not see very far in front of him. And there's some freezing fog being reported in the Brandon area, so there could be some patchy fog in that southwestern corner of the province. Once the fog dissipates, though, a high of +1 today for Brandon. Tonight, -2, and tomorrow, a high of +5 with clearing skies in the morning. Thompson is -8 with some mist on the way to a -4. Cloudy skies expected today, Thompson. Tonight, 60% chance of snow late this evening, risk of freezing rain. A low of -5, and tomorrow a high of -1 with cloudy skies. We're going to see zeros in the Dauphin Parkland region. It's -14 there today. Steinbach's going to see a 0. It's -5 right now. +1 in the Pembina Valley, in the Morden-Winkler area. Pembina Valley, it's -9 right now. Melita, you're -3. You'll see a +2 today. And Gimli-Interlake, -5 on the way to a -2. Once again, we're a -5 in the city of Winnipeg with some cloud cover at this hour. At 7:38 in the morning, not much going on as far as major major incidents, stalls, crashes to report on, do call me at 788-3093. If you do see something, let us know about it. And I, again, just mentioned Kyle saw was going through some fog in that southwestern corner of the province. If it is safe to do so, give me a call at that number. Let me know what's hanging out or what you're seeing on the highways on your commute this morning.
Quick question for you, Pat Kanuga.
Yes.
The holiday season, do you overeat, overspend?
Always.
Okay, there's three choices, so we already know you
let's
overeat.
just talk about eating.
Do you overeat, do you overspend, or do you overcommit, like to go to things?
Just overeat.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
That's it?
Yeah, overcommit. Nah, I just kind of, no. Well, maybe a little bit. We'll see. We'll see this year if I overcommit.
So after 8 o'clock, we are going to be having this discussion because a lot of people find it difficult to set boundaries. You want to eat everything. You want to maybe buy every gift.
See everyone?
You want to go everywhere, maybe. Or maybe you don't, but you don't know how to say no. So how do you set those boundaries over the holiday season? We're going to have that discussion after.
New goal this year. I'm going to try and do all three of those then. How's that?
You can't. Pat, no boundaries, boundary free. For the rest of us, we'll tune into the interview after 8.
It's new. It's the new and improved Pat, boundary free.
21 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Cloudy and -5, as Pat said, here in Winnipeg. Well, next on the show, for centuries, English has been Jamaica's official language, despite the fact that many on the island prefer to speak patois. Now the Jamaica prepares to leave the Commonwealth by 2025, and at this time, there's a growing push for patois to become the country's official language. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the language, here's a clip from Venetia on Wikipedia's YouTube. She's reading a Dry Foot Boy, a poem that is written completely in patois.
Me tell him say him auntie and him cousin them send howdy, and ask him how him getting on. Him say, oh, jolly, jolly. Me start to feel so sorry for the poor bad lucky soul. Me think him come a foreign long, come catch bad foreign coal.
Deandre Douglas is a first-generation immigrant from Jamaica. She's a Winnipegger and on the line to talk about this. Hi, good morning.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being with us. So when you hear about this movement, as I mentioned, in Jamaica to potentially make patois the official language, what do you think? What comes to mind?
I think that any steps towards decolonization is a good thing. And as you said before, we are taking steps towards leaving the Commonwealth by 2025, and that's another step towards decolonization that I think that all Jamaicans should be proud of.
When you hear patois, what does it make you feel?
It for sure reminds me of family, of home, of my childhood. I grew up around a lot of people who spoke patois, so the majority of Jamaicans do speak patois. So yeah, it's very nostalgic for me, but also very like a warm feeling.
For listeners that might be unfamiliar with the language, how do you describe it?
So it's very similar to like a Haitian Creole, but it's English-based instead of French-based. But as you can hear, there are a few words that you can pick out if you speak English, but it is completely different in the same way that Creole is completely different from French. But if you speak French, you can still pick up a lot of words.
And you yourself, I'm just curious whether or not you speak it.
Not really. As a first-generation immigrant, I do have the privilege of code switching to patois when I'm speaking with my family. Which again is a privilege because majority of Jamaicans, this is the first and or only language spoken. But yeah, I would be only amongst family.
Where do we see the influence of patois outside of Jamaica?
You really see it in a worldwide context. You know, patois is a dialect with a global reach. And that's again why I think we should be so proud of it. Like, for example, in the UK and London and other Caribbean countries as well, like Toronto, well, it's like a Caribbean country basically, and London as well. So there are very relevant cultural cities where patois is widely spoken.
How important is language to a sense of ownership and identity? You were talking about this, the first thing you said was, it's a step toward decolonization, obviously moving away from the monarchy. But what's the role of language in real ownership of identity to you?
Well, I think for anyone, cultural identity is a huge part of who they are, and language and culture are deeply intertwined. So a sense of cultural belonging and a sense of identity comes with speaking a language that belongs to your culture. And English is not really a language that belongs to my culture. It's a colonial vestige. So, yeah, I think that having that aspect of culture, and we have such rich culture in Jamaica, is so important.
I know that you said that patois is stigmatized. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you look at African American vernacular English, or basically any Creole language that has come from colonialism or slavery, these things are deeply stigmatized. For example, the stereotypes that it's a harsh dialect or that it's aggressive. These are stereotypes allocated to Black dialects. So, like, if you see Americans who speak African American vernacular English, which is another dialect that has been co-opted by many outsiders, it is still stigmatized for the in-group.
And there's examples of that all over the place in pop culture over the years as well, right? Like, it's almost like an undoing
Yes.
for people because they've been used to seeing patois used in that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think this push says about where Jamaica currently is as a country overall?
It says that we have come a long way from the colonization of the colony, which used to be, as Canada, as any other place, it had its native people there as well. And that language is completely gone now too, the language of the Arawak Indians. And now we see that our language is kind of being stigmatized. So I think it's so important because we rarely see these steps taken towards decolonization. So when it does happen, it's certainly meaningful and sends a very special message, which not only to the outside world, but more importantly to Jamaicans, to Haitians who speak Creole, Nigerians who speak Pidgin, African Americans who speak AAVE. It has a meaningful impact and it sends a very powerful message.
Would you like to hear, I'm just curious whether or not you'd like to hear it spoken more here, like in Winnipeg, and in Canada it's spoken, of course, and it is spoken in Winnipeg, but more, or is it something that you want to lean into and learn more yourself, DeAndre?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I have a very well-rounded understanding of the dialect since I did grow up around it, but Jamaicans are very welcoming. We love when other people take an interest into our culture. So, of course, I'd love to hear people speak it. Right now, if I do hear it, my ears kind of go out and go, okay, there's a Jamaican over there. But it would be cool to hear it spoken more here.
Thank you very much for being with us to weigh in on this morning. I appreciate having you on CBC.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
That's DeAndre Douglas, member of Winnipeg's Jamaican community.
Frequencies with Errol Nazareth.
The world is alive with sound, whether across the street or across the pond, from back home or in your own backyard. Every place has a sound and every person has a story. Discover songs and stories from people and communities across Canada and around the world.
Frequencies with host Errol Nazareth. Episodes available on demand on the CBC Listen app.
Right now in Winnipeg, it is -5 and it is cloudy. For the day, we're going to be around -1 and a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon in our forecast. Still ahead in this half hour of the program, the jobs have now been posted. We'll get an update on the city's plan to hire at least 20 safety officers on transit buses in the new year. We'll hear from the head of the new transit security force this half hour about what the job specifically entails and also what kind of interest they've had since they announced they were going in this direction officially. So stay tuned. That's still ahead in this half hour. A couple minutes, though, before we get to that interview, and Pat has popped in with responses to a question we asked you on Facebook. You might have heard on World Report this morning, nationally, they're taking another look at shrinkflation, where you go out and you're going to purchase something, and you look at a package, you think you're getting a certain amount of something, but in fact, if you don't look closely enough, it might not be the amount you're used to buying in the same size box. It means there's less inside. So shrinkflation. We asked you on Facebook where you've noticed it and whether or not it's changing any of your shopping habits out there. So what are people saying, Pat?
Well, yes, you have to look very carefully at what you're buying. So Sonia Kleiman says, bought some tissues and found them much smaller. Pretty sure my face didn't shrink. Thanks, Sonia.
Good call. Yeah,
Kelly
good call.
Beck said, because it's baking season, the Chippets chocolate chips. You really have to pay attention and adjust your recipes accordingly. They used to be a 300-gram bag. Now they're 250 or 270 grams, depending on the variety. Peter Harvey says, it's certainly frustrating. It's driving me to stay far away from packaged foods. Potato chips are getting replaced with home fries and popcorn for movie night. We're not sports fans, but work for games too. Cooking more is generally better to stay away from shrinkflation. Hot breakfast oatmeal is a healthier choice than and chocolate-covered sugar bombs, etc., etc. Ultimately, you need the media to be aggressive about reporting on shrinkflation. That's what Peter Harvey says. Quickly here, Kevin Champagne says price is up, size is smaller, and sales don't seem to be much of a bargain. We are forced to really do our homework before we shop and have to weigh in the price of fuel when we're buying local versus buying online. The money doesn't go as far, and even the diet has changed as we eat more pork and very little beef. So just a sampling of what some of the people are saying about shrinkflation, that story that we're hearing about on World Report.
Yeah, it's everywhere. So what products are you noticing it in? And thanks to everybody for weighing in this morning. You can also call. We'll get some calls on after 8 if you want to call and pick up the phone or Bluetooth us if you're out and about. 788-3205. 788-3205 is our listener line. Thanks, Pat.
You're welcome.
It is right now 11 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM or on the app. I'm Marcy Markusa with our team here at Information Radio. Just a reminder, if you've not yet done so, you want to subscribe to the CBC Manitoba on YouTube, to CBC Manitoba on YouTube. So we have been sort of quietly having the show on YouTube every morning and getting ready for an official launch a little bit later I guess not this year and into next year. It's hard to believe we're in mid-December already. But one of the reasons you want to go on there is maybe just to see Abby's fabulous shirts and sense of style every day. But more seriously, it's to engage with us and, of course, see what you can't on the radio. So often there's visuals that accompany our stories. I know when we're prepping for our shows every morning, I often will be watching videos and seeing visuals. People send photos. So it'll be lovely to have a way to share all of those. Also, if you have things to share with us, I always mention the listener line, but you can always share pictures as well on any of our social feeds. So during the show, my page, Marcy Markusa on Facebook, acts as a show page. So please, if you have photos to post there, I know often people post weather photos or sky photos. Yesterday, some fog in the city, but beautiful sunrises out west. So if you want to post anything there, you can do that as well. Or you can always use the email address, which is radio893@cbc.ca. It is right now coming up to 9 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or as I mentioned on the app. Well, after 8 on the program, I asked Pat this question, and so I'll just mention the interview that we have coming up. Post-pandemic parties and gatherings are now in full swing, but all of those new opportunities to socialize sometimes do tend to come with a tendency to overcommit. You might be overloaded with your calendar. Why it's important now to set some boundaries and learn how to say no. So that is overcommitting to socialized gatherings, social gatherings, but it is also around overspending in the season, overeating in the season, all of those things. So that interview is coming up after 8 o'clock on how to set those boundaries. Well, full disclosure, we're just having a bit of a challenge getting our next guest on the line to talk about the positions for transit security. So while we are hoping that we will get that interview, we're getting a phone call. Live radio, folks. Sit tight. Our next interview is about the City of Winnipeg hiring safety officers for Winnipeg Transit. The goal is to improve safety on buses. Job postings came out online last week, and we first heard about this back in September as part of the city's new transit security force. So these new safety officers will be expected to intervene and de-escalate violent incidents. They will also be expected to direct people on in crisis situations and moments on where they can go for help. So Bob Christmas is just connecting with the show now. Bob is a former police officer who's head of the new transit security force. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
So now that it's official, how many jobs are posted right now?
We've got the funding for 26 full-time equivalents, so 21 officers, 2 supervisors, 2 support staff, and myself.
How many applicants, do you already have since this went up last week?
Oh, well, my friend in HR who's working on this with me advises we got 60 applicants overnight the first night. So I imagine well over 100. I've had a lot of interest, and I've been talking to a lot of great people that I think are going to form a fantastic team.
Do you have to have a security or police background to do this job?
Just a criminal background check and vulnerable person sector check.
So what does the job specifically entail? What kinds of things are in that description, if you could elaborate for people that missed it?
Yeah, so it's going to be a unique blend that we're looking for in these applicants, these officers, the ability to perform a security and law enforcement function, but also with a strong emphasis on social work. So we're looking for people who have a lot of compassion. This is not an extension of the police force. It's not purely security function. We're looking more at people who are able to pull community resources together around social issues.
Now, obviously, we know that our city's been dealing with an addiction crisis and also some violent incidents on transit. How much training will the new officers get?
Well, they're going to have over a month of training block to begin with, and then the training will be ongoing from there. So heavy emphasis on the authorities that being a sworn peace officer bring, and compassionate, trauma-informed, nonviolent crisis intervention, and how to draw on all the mental health and addictions resources in the community and help people with challenges around homelessness and so forth.
I know that you've shared before that the safety officers won't carry weapons, but what kind of protection will they have?
Well, training and your mind is first and foremost, but they will have protective body armor, handcuffs, and batons for extreme cases, and slash-proof gloves, and the uniform is protective safety gear, so good boots.
What's the range of salary for these positions?
The officer was 80 to 100,000 in 6 steps, and the supervisors came in at 85 to 115,000 with, I believe, 5 steps.
So these are good paying positions.
Yeah, and that's I'm really proud and pleased of the city for seeing it that way, because we really wanted to get solid, good applicants who are going to stay with this, like really learn the system and be able to do some good in the community. So I was really happy with the price range that the salary ranges that they came in with.
How many buses do we know yet? How many buses will have safety officers on them? And will the officers be visible to the public, or is the idea that they're just there on the bus and maybe in plain clothes?
Yeah, no, the idea is they'll be highly visible, so to give a sense of safety and security for the drivers and the staff and the riding public, and so they'll be highly visible, and everyone will know they're there.
And are they on all routes, or where are you starting? Do we know that yet?
Oh, it's a massive system. At rush hour, there's over 500 buses sometimes on the road, so certainly they won't be everywhere, but we'll be targeting. We're going to have to be laser targeted with a smaller group like this to start with, so looking at the problem areas.
Have you had any reaction yet from transit drivers to this coming?
Everyone I've talked to has been totally positive and supportive, and they can't wait to see it come. Everybody wants it yesterday, and I'm just feeling totally supported and encouraged, and we're trying to get it off the ground as quick as we possibly can.
Do you have a date where do you have a date where you're going to launch yet, or is that still being decided?
Well, we're hiring as quickly as we can, and training will take place in January, and shortly after that, we'll have boots on the ground.
In the new year. Yeah. What concerns you most about transit? I know we've had this conversation in September when you were launching the idea of this, or getting into rather the details of this. But right now, when you think about where we're at in Winnipeg, what are the greatest concerns you have? Or maybe I should ask this positively, what areas are you most hoping to make an improvement in?
Well, yeah, that's a big question. And, like I said, with a fairly small group, we're going to do targeted contributions where we can. So it's going to have to evolve, and I'm not sure exactly what the main focus will be. Like, obviously, we're going to be on transit, in and around the transit system. I'm hoping that these officers will be able to rally community resources around people who are having to live in bus shelters and ride the buses just to stay warm. Hopefully we can find some alternatives for them that'll be good for everyone.
So not just responding to incidents, but also looking at, connecting with people who might be on the bus for other reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we've been talking regularly along the way. We will talk again in the new year as you get through your hiring process. Thanks very much for this, Bob, for the details.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a good day.
You too. That's Bob Christmas, former police officer who's head of the new transit security force in Winnipeg. If you ride the bus and you have a thought on this, love to know what you think about this coming. You can always weigh in on the show, as I mentioned, on any of our social streams. Heather Wells, headlines this morning?
Good morning. Yes, Premier Wapkanu says Manitoba can't just stop collecting the federal carbon tax on home heating. The Premier unveiled a legal opinion saying just that, but that is what Manitoba's opposition PCs want the NDP government to do. We're going to hear more on that. And a Winnipeg man accused of giving cannabis candies or edibles to trick-or-treaters last Halloween no longer faces prosecution. The charges against Sheldon Chochinov has been stayed. We'll hear the story in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
It is -5 in Winnipeg. Been there all morning. -1 for the daytime high. Could be some fog in Brandon, freezing fog in between Melita and Verdon. Could be some thick fog. Coming up, how to not to overdo it over the holidays and set those boundaries, whether it's spending, eating, or visiting. Stay with us.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Steven Sanchez is what they call an old soul. He's had billions of streams and a lot of success on TikTok, singing songs that sound more like 1963 than 2023. Steven Sanchez will be here to tell you why his music is having a moment right now. Baby, give it all. That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
As more people work from home, there are questions around what to do with all those empty office spaces. Some cities are turning them into homes to help with the housing crisis, but architects say it's not always easy. It's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcy Young. First Nations chiefs are gathering in Ottawa for a crucial vote. Hundreds of members of the country's Indigenous communities are picking a new leader. 6 candidates are running. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, an important issue for many of them focuses on a dark period of Canadian history and ways to bring it further into the light.
Me, myself, I'm a 60 Scoop survivor myself.
Cornell McLean is the chief of Lake Manitoba First Nation. He's behind a resolution calling for a national inquiry into the 60 Scoop, a practice from the 1950s until the early 1990s, when more than 20,000 Indigenous children were taken from their homes and placed with non-Indigenous families.
And there's lots of people out there that are still wondering who their families are, wondering who their communities are.
Cindy Woodhouse says she supports the call, a position she shares with the other 5 candidates vying to become the next national chief of the Assembly of First Nations.
I support it because we are in a reconciliation process with Canada.
Dean Sayers is running for the top job, along with David Pratt, who says an inquiry would address a crisis that continues today.
We have more children in child welfare right now in care of the provinces and territories social services system than at the height of the residential school.
Sheila North is running for national chief a second time. She says she supports the issue, but doesn't want to see a repeat of past inquiries where recommendations sit on a shelf.
And if there is one for a 60 Scoop, I hope that going forward we'll start to build in the implementation plan ahead of time.
An inquiry could be at the top of the next national chief's to-do list after the ballots are cast tomorrow. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Israel's offensive continues to intensify in southern Gaza. Israeli airstrikes light up the night sky. Soldiers are also on the ground. Israel's military says they are making aggressive action against Hamas and other armed groups in parts of southern Gaza. Outside the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, chaos. Many of those wounded overnight are being treated there. Aid groups in Gaza are warning of a humanitarian crisis. They say living conditions are getting worse. Mariana Sploracic is the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross.
I've just visited the European Gaza Hospital. We are facing a situation here that will not be healed by sending in more trucks. We need to provide protection to the civilians in Gaza. to the women and children, to the elderly people that I saw today that have nowhere to go.
Another local UN official says the intense fighting could make it so that aid groups can no longer respond. Ukraine's president will be back before U.S. lawmakers making another pitch for support. Appearing on video, Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to update senators on his country's battle with Russian forces. The White House has been urging the Senate to unlock another $60 billion in funding for Ukraine. There has been a lot of pushback. The CBC's Richard Madden joins us from Washington. And Richard, let's start with the funding issue. What is the concern?
Well, President Zelensky is expected to make that urgent push for more U.S. aid when he speaks to U.S. senators through a secure video link later this afternoon. And this comes at a critical time with new funding for Ukraine stalled in Congress. A growing number of Republicans say they'll vote against it unless Democrats boost funding to secure America's southern border. So this puts in jeopardy President Biden's $100 billion aid package, with $60 billion of that earmarked for Ukraine. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is urging his colleagues to support it.
The world is watching what we do in Congress these coming weeks. You can bet Vladimir Putin is watching, Hamas is watching, Iran, President Xi, North Korea, all our adversaries. They're watching closely.
Now, the White House has warned funding for Ukraine is nearly spent, and Congress needs to approve more funding by the end of the year. The White House says the lack of funding would, quote, kneecap Ukraine on the battlefield against the Russian invasion.
So, Richard, what exactly are we going to hear from Zelensky?
Right. Senator Schumer says Zelensky will outline, quote, what's at stake as fears grow of a stalemate in a war approaching 2 years. Now, the U.S. is the world's largest contributor of aid for Ukraine, but a growing sense of war fatigue and congressional gridlock is putting that funding in question.
Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Richard Madden reporting from Washington. There are questions this morning about the fate of the CBC and some of its programming. The corporation announced yesterday it's prepared to cut 10% of its workforce as it faces a $125 million budget shortfall. CBC's president, Catherine Tate, says that means about 600 jobs cut. The CBC's Janice McGregor is in Ottawa. And Janice, Catherine Tate announced this before the CBC's budget for next year is even finalized. Why is that?
The president said yesterday laying out this plan now is the responsible thing for CBC's management to do, but revealing that the magnitude of the government's proposed cuts translates into 200 vacancies that won't be filled and another 600 jobs that are going to be lost, including a few hundred in Quebec, where cuts to cultural industries are a very politically sensitive thing. That puts a lot of pressure on the federal cabinet and especially Heritage Minister Pascal Saint-Onge, who seemed to be saying yesterday that even though the CBC was asked to review its budget just like other federal crown corporations, things maybe aren't final just yet.
The final decision has not been made yet. CBC Radio-Canada is aware of that.
Yesterday's news also lands in the middle of a debate over whether the CBC should be included in the allocation of the $100 million in compensation that the federal government negotiated in its recent deal with Google. Some were arguing last week that CBC didn't need to be factored into that formula because it already gets the money it needs from the federal government. Yesterday, the public broadcaster's president seemed to be saying, well, no, actually, it doesn't.
The CBC's budget has to pass through minority parliament. What were the opposition parties saying yesterday?
Pierre Poilievre posted last night how the CBC was saying it was broke again after paying $99 million in bonuses to, quote, incompetent executives and Liberal talking heads. But then Bloc MP Alexis Brunel-Doucette pointed out to his Francophone followers how the Conservative leader seemed to be delighted with the job losses in Quebec newsrooms. And he said the silence from Quebec Conservative MPs makes them complicit. Another Conservative MP, Kevin Waugh, didn't stay silent.
Well, it's a sad day. When people lose their job in the industry, it's sad.
Peter Julian said New Democrats want to see the Liberals take real steps to protect news in communities that rely heavily on the CBC to stay connected. But we will see if the NDP is prepared to go to the mat for the CBC in next spring's budget negotiations.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. In New Brunswick, the peat moss industry is reporting one of its worst seasons in decades. The province is one of the biggest producers. Peat moss is essentially for gardeners and commercial greenhouses. Producers say poor weather this summer sent production levels plummeting. And as the CBC's Alexandre Silberman tells us, that could create a global shortage of growing mixes.
On a gusty fall day on Lamech Island, Jean-Yves Dague treads across the vast peatlands, a kaleidoscope of vivid red, white, and green vegetation. Dague stops and kneels down, tearing a handful of sphagnum moss from the ground and showing the organic soil underneath.
To have a thickness of about 1 meter, it would take 1,000 years to accumulate material.
That material, decomposed over centuries, is peat, a lucrative business on New Brunswick's Acadian Peninsula. It's processed and shipped around the world as a starter for everything from roses to the greens on golf courses. But this summer, frequent rainstorms left the fields too swampy for harvesting. Dague, who runs the industry association, says production dropped to 40% of a typical year.
23, that's the worst season ever, according to the older peat producers.
At this processing plant in Rexton, production is down to 30%. Manager René Duguay says less peat means fewer shifts for his seasonal workers.
It's very tough for the industry, as well as for our employees.
Duguay expects many processing plants will run out of peat this winter, and that could mean a shortage on the market this spring. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Lamech, New Brunswick.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcy Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Markusa. We're live in downtown Winnipeg, and this is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Lots of ways to connect with the morning show. And lots of ways to connect with your loved ones over the holiday season. The thing is, when do you say no? This can be the season to overdo it, to overeat, to overspend, to overcommit. And it's not always great for your mental health. It's important to set boundaries now to avoid stress and anxiety, but how do you do that? Stay tuned. We're going to talk about it this half hour. You're with Information Radio on CBC as mentioned. Time right now, 8:10. A little bit foggy in Westman. In a moment, we'll have weather and traffic with Pat Kanua. Stay with us. Before we get to that, though, Heather Wells is here with our morning headlines. Good morning once again.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg retailers say they are doing whatever they can to deter thieves. Police say retail theft is 44% higher for the first half of this year compared to last year. At Family Foods downtown, owner Kevin Schmidt says some people are brazen enough to steal an entire basket of groceries. He uses stickers on some items with sensors that sound when they're taken out the door. We'll hear more from him. And a Winnipeg community group that helps people in need had to shut down its hamper request line because of overwhelming demand. The co-founder of Peg City Kindness Crew says she knew demand would be higher this year, but was shocked when requests more than tripled. We'll hear those stories and more in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
She was actually on with us early this morning, and she had a moment of emotion when I asked her what it was like, Pat Kanuga, when they had to decide that they couldn't take in any more calls. So as we know, the need is historic in our community.
Is it ever?
Yeah, you can hear at 8:30, as Heather mentioned in the news, more about their efforts and where you can help out if you have something to give. You are here with the forecast.
Yeah, let's start with traffic, though, because forecast is kind of merging into some traffic issues this morning. So we're hearing from southwestern Manitoba. Commuter Keith said west of Glenboro, thick fog and misty patches, low visibility at times, and same condition on Highway 10 south of Brandon. So he takes Highway 2 and Highway 10 from Glenboro to Brandon. So he said that the highway is a tad frosty as well. Heard from Debbie, Crystal City. Clear from Crystal City to Boundary Trails. Fog seems to be developing clearing around Winkler, though. Thank you for the call, Deb. Much appreciated. So we are hearing about some foggy patches in southwestern Manitoba. There's no fog advisory out yet, but we also heard from Kyle last hour between Melita and Verdun on Highway 83, and it was foggy in that area. Thank you, Kyle, for that call. And Brandon has some freezing fog right now, and it's -7 on the way to a high of 1 today on the plus side, but a mix of sun and cloud once this fog dissipates. Here in the Peg, we are -5, up 1 in the past hour, and we will get today to a -1. And we have some clearing out there right now, although it's hard to see by the blinds, but we have some cloud cover, but it looks like we're going to get some clearing from the west right away. Southwestern corner looks a bit more clear as far as the clouds go, but a whole whack of cloud is coming in from Saskatchewan, which might be over that Saskatchewan-Manitoba border in just a little while. And we have a lot of clouds north, Interlake, and the eastern side of the province as well. But again, we'll get to that -1 in the city of Winnipeg today. So I mentioned those calls about fog. I should mention the traffic line if there's anything to let us know about inside the city as well. 788-3093. No reports of stalls or crashes or major delays at 8:14 in the morning.
Well, as I've been mentioning, it is the season to overindulge, to overspend, and for many of us, to overcommit to many events and gatherings. But experts say before you say yes to all the invitations, you may want to learn how to say no if you need to. Our next guest is Joanne Unger. She's regularly been on the show. She's a clinical psychologist and president of the Manitoba Psychological Society. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, we've kept Pat here for some role playing in a second, so sit tight there, Pat.
Fun and exciting.
You're going to invite me to a party.
Okay.
I'm going to try to say no to you. Why do you think that it's important to talk about this?
Really important because many of us struggle with saying no. So there's this really natural reaction that we want to please people in our life, and we want this sense of belonging. So we want to be connected to others. So whenever we have to put up a boundary, we fear a conflict, we fear the reaction, and that's a really natural feeling to kind of not want to have this negative consequence of feeling no, because we have this natural desire to be connected and to belong. So it can lead us to saying yes to things that we don't really want to, or to, like you mentioned, overcommit ourselves and have too many things on our plate, end up feeling stressed and not enjoying our time.
I think the thing is there's a fear of offending someone or someone being upset, because that does happen.
For sure.
And then you don't know what to do in those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. It can happen, and we have to kind of weigh what are the pros and cons of that, what are the benefits to ourselves and to others, and the consequences of that, and recognizing also that the other person's need or wants are as valuable as our own. And that's sometimes something we forget.
So let's role play this party thing first of all, and then we'll get into some more discussion about this. So Pat, invite me to a holiday party, and I'm going to say no.
So you're coming to Abby's Christmas party on Friday night, right?
I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah, but come on, all the cool kids are going to be there, and Abby's like bought all this food, and it's going to be a great time.
You know, I really appreciate Abby. You know, I love Abby, but I have something else that evening, and it's not that I've prioritized, it's just that I try not to overload myself, and I did commit to something else, so I'm sorry I won't be able to be there.
Okay.
See, like that, like even though we're role playing, I mean, that feels like that you feel that disappointment. Yep. How did I do there, and what should people say? Because that's what people really want to know in the moment. What can help us explain to loved ones and friends and family that we do love them? It's not about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did some really nice things there. Was you tried to give some reasons as to why you weren't going, and you also empathized with him and expressed some caring. There is alternative ways as well. So we don't always have to even give a reason.
This is the hard stuff.
This is the hard stuff.
Okay,
right?
We'll practice again with no reason.
Well, and this is something a person needs to weigh, right? In terms of the relationship that you have, and in terms of, the consequences that that's going to have. So a no is a no, and we can just say no. I have another trick that I often use for folks who really struggle with saying no, is can I get back to you? So sometimes in that moment, we might be really stressed, or we might not be able to think of what we want to say. And you say, you know what, let me check my calendar. I got to get back to you with my family. I tell my kids to use us as parents, I gotta check with the family calendar. I gotta check with my partner or my friend, and then you can have some time to formulate what you want to say and how you want to say it.
I will say this: during the pandemic, we had one of the most beautiful Christmases ever, and it was just my husband and I, because it could only be my husband and I. But I will tell you, it was one of our most beautiful Christmases ever. That did not sit well with my extended family.
Yeah.
Because it became sort of I had this awkward moment where I was like, I wonder how I could incorporate more of that quiet time and family time, because I really learned that I appreciated that. So what would you say to people who are trying to express that? What was best for me, I actually do enjoy a quieter holiday. That can be really hard to express.
Yeah, and that's the piece where you can decide whether or not you tell someone that that's actually what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? Because you may have that sense that the other person isn't going to understand or respect that. So you can just say, you know what, I'm not going to be able to make it this year.
And just sit with that.
Just they don't need to know what's on your schedule or what's not on your schedule.
If it's best for you, it's best for you.
That's okay.
Yeah. Pat left, so he's mad I'm not going to the party. He's left the studio. I'm just kidding. We won't role play anymore. I want to turn to some serious questions here. The whole thing is obviously important for people, but how difficult can this season be for people who experience anxiety or other mental health challenges around all these interactions?
Yeah, it can be, depending on the type of anxiety or struggle that a person has, it can be very different for different people. So that saying no can be very anxiety provoking. That's why I sometimes suggest the maybe as a way to move into that. Also, if people have different mental health challenges, the pull can be to actually isolate. So you can have two opposite problems. So you can have the overcommitting, and then you can have also the withdrawal and the isolation. And so each person has to kind of figure out what is going to be the best for me this holiday season in terms of managing my mental health and also managing that connection and belonging. So one of the biggest supports to our mental health is social connection, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm our nervous systems and our stress levels.
People often lean on, I'm an introvert, I don't want to go to a big party. And that might be true. You might restore your energies on your own. Is there a way to express that? Because people who are extroverted, of course, it's just different ways of being, but they walk through the world gaining energy from everybody around them. So they want to be at every party, right? So where's the middle ground there? Is there a way to tell sometimes you can't even tell if you're, isolating yourself, to your point?
Yeah, I think you have to do that regular kind of check-in in terms of how you're doing. If you're feeling lonely, or if you're feeling down, or if you're missing things, that will be the sign. Introverts need people too, just in different ways. So finding what works for you, what charges you, and then spacing that out and balancing it with some of those social activities and those commitments. Your close friends will know that you're an introvert, and you'll have over the years shared about
they won't have seen you at everything,
right?
Yep.
And you may have even talked about it, about what energizes you, and they'll understand. Well, the hope is that they'll understand.
Just as a last question, because it's all been hopefully very helpful for people at a difficult time of year, but also a lovely time of year. Let's not get lost in that. How can being overcommitted, though, impact the real value of the holidays to us as human beings?
Absolutely. So we can get a little bit focused on getting all the details done. And if we're overcommitting and we're focusing on a lot of, I would say, kind of the stuff or the administrative side of things, we can kind of miss the value and the meaning that it has for us, and we can miss the social connection. So if we're, spending a lot of time on getting our house ready or, getting all the things, and some of those things are very meaningful. And so that's something I often encourage people to focus on, is what is the meaning and the value for you during the holiday time, and try to bring your attention to that, and then maybe let go of some of those expectations that may or may not be as important as we might think they are. So having some time of reflection and focusing on value and meaning.
My friend years ago said, you didn't get time to bake the cookies? What? You didn't put the tree up? You didn't send the cards? That's okay. You come in and see me so we can hang out? Yeah, I am. So I always thought that was a good one. If you're sort of stressed about it, take a second to figure it out. But I love this time of year. Appreciate your advice, and thank you for coming in.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Joanne Unger is a clinical psychologist and president of the Manitoba Psychological Society. How do you set boundaries in your own life? Maybe you have some advice here, or maybe you've come to something or a phrase that you use a lot that works for you. You can always weigh in by calling us 788-3205.
A season of giving, a season for kindness. We asked you to help make the season kind for those in need, and Manitoba You raised over $300,000 in support of Harvest Manitoba. Thank you, Manitoba, for your generosity and for helping make the season kind.
8:22 a.m. is the time right now. Also want to make sure that we think about volunteering at this time of year. I know I'm kind of talking to myself, but by extension also last week hearing from Harvest Manitoba, there's a huge need for volunteers as well. There's a lot of people that don't have the boundary problem. They might have the loneliness problem, maybe no one to reach out to. So all the different places in Winnipeg where we can find places to connect going to be important, especially this year. It's trying times out there. It's 8:23 a.m. on 89.3. Well, these days, if you are flying over the holidays, you'll know already that most airlines are going to charge you a fee to check your bags, but they let you bring 2 items on board for free. No one wants to pay, so everyone now is doing carry-on. And the slowdown in boarding can mean that finding space in that overhead bin gets very stressful. So could anything make that aspect of flying better? Danielle Nerman this morning is with the CBC show Cost of Living, and this morning she says yes, if airlines made one simple change.
Kat Jones spent a decade working as a WestJet flight attendant and says you wouldn't believe the people brought on board. Houseplants, body pillows. Flights coming back from Disneyland were especially challenging.
Where am I going to put these lightsabers and massive stuffed animals and Mickey Mouses, coming in on top of the allotted one carry-on, one personal item?
Then there was the time someone boarded the plane with a wedding cake.
Oh my gosh, here we go. And I'm already looking down the aisle to see, okay, what's the bin situation like?
That cake wasn't going in a bin. It needed its own seat. Passengers had to move around, and the flight was delayed by 10 minutes.
And that kind of thing can just really screw up the entire day.
When flight crews have to play Tetris with carry-on, that can delay the next flight and the one after that. This is a real problem for airlines. Henry Hartevelt is a travel analyst with Atmosphere Research Group.
When the airplane is sitting on the ground, it's not making money for the airline.
Airlines are always trying to streamline the boarding process. That's why United just brought in something called Wilma. Passengers in the window seat board first, then the middle, and last, people in the aisle. But if everyone is still looking for space to cram in their carry-on, Hartevelt says there will be delays.
If you go back into the 1970s and 80s, airlines would board flights maybe 20 minutes before departure, but we didn't have this jostling for space in the overhead bins.
Hartevelt says carry-on is the heart of the problem. Airlines need to give passengers a reason to check their luggage. Peace of mind, like real-time tracking for bags or compensation if you have to wait too long at the carousel. Most importantly, he says airlines need to start charging for carry-on and allow passengers to check their bags for free.
People would appreciate this. They would feel less nickeled and dimed. And the people who want the convenience and control would pay to bring their bags on the plane. So I believe that the airline would generate probably the same amount of money or possibly even more.
Because less time on the ground means more time in the air. If a flight can shave even a few minutes off boarding, the airline may be able to squeeze in one more flight a day.
And when you apply it by the scale of most mid-size and large-size airlines, such as WestJet and Air Canada, then that adds up to big revenue.
That's good for airlines, but also could be good for us.
It also means more flights for us as travelers, more choice, and potentially more low-fare seats available.
But if airlines change nothing, Hartevelt says boarding delays will carry on, and carry-on luggage will continue to be a battle.
It's like a Hunger Games environment on the plane, and may the odds ever be in your favor of finding a spot for your bag near your seat.
For CBC Radio, I'm Danielle Nerman.
Man, can you imagine the looks that passenger that brought on the wedding cake got? Can't imagine they were too pretty. If you want to hear the whole episode of The Cost of Living, make sure you can check it out this morning on 11:30, right here on CBC Radio 189.3, or you can always subscribe to the CBC's Cost of Living podcast. Well, speaking of subscribing, YouTube, Information Radio on YouTube, CBC Manitoba on the channel. And good morning to James Coruscant, who's watching on YouTube this morning. Thank you for the note just moments ago about the fog. So really foggy at Hilltop. We're getting other calls as well. We had heard Highway 83 between Melita and Verdun had some thick fog this morning, and freezing fog this morning in Brandon. Not bad here in Winnipeg, although it is cloudy. We remain at -6, and we're going to be around -1 for most of the day. Pat has popped in with additional details on the commute today.
You know, I just thought I would mention, if you're just joining us in this half hour, at 9 o'clock this morning, the St. Vital Bridge is going to have some delays for several hours between 9 o'clock this morning and 3 this afternoon. Hopefully it's all fixed up for the rush hour. Now, what I'm talking about is not all the construction done, but one of the spans has been completed with all the resurfacing. So the northbound lane that you've been using for the past several months to get into the downtown, well, you're going to be using the other side now, the other span, what's normally the southbound. So it's going to be one lane each way still. It's still just going to be slow in that area. But if you're in that area today, you might see some really big delays because of the switchover that they're doing. So I just thought I'd mention that.
The technical term is the Great Switcheroo.
It's the Great Bridge Switcheroo.
There's no technical term.
Yeah,
tomorrow,
really.
The medical column is on, and Dr. Bardwaj tomorrow, thank you, Pat, is going to be talking about what might be ailing you. So there's people sniffling and coughing and going to the doctor all over the place. So you might be thinking, is it COVID? Is it the flu? Is it something worse? Dr. Bardwaj will bring us an update on some of those things that are worse and what's happening with respiratory viruses around the world, specifically one that's affecting children in China. We'll also look at what is going around closer to home here across Canada. So that's Dr. Raj Bardwaj on our Wednesday morning medical column, which is a regular feature right here on CBC. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. We are at -6. We've lost 1 degree in the last hour. We're going to see just a light southerly breeze today, and that high of -1, even warmer tomorrow. Winnipeg retailers are grappling with a spike in theft. At Family Foods downtown, owner Kevin Schmidt says theft is going up. Police say retail theft is 44% higher for the first half of this year compared to last year. They say they're targeting enforcement, especially in the lead up to Christmas. Schmidt says some people are brazen enough to walk out with a full basket of groceries.
There's nothing we can do. Some staff will step up and do things. I don't like when that happens, because I do fear that something bad could come out of it, because you don't know if someone is carrying a weapon.
Schmidt has put stickers on higher-priced items like meat and health and beauty products. They set off a sensor at the door. Schmidt is welcoming the help from police, but says it's not worth it for him to report every little theft to help police track trends. A Winnipeg community group that helps people in need had to shut down its hamper request line 24 hours after opening it because of overwhelming demand. Last year, Peg City Kindness Crew sent out 202 hampers with food and other items. Co-founder Deanna Stroud says she knew the demand would be higher this year, but was shocked when requests more than tripled.
They're paying their mortgage or their rent, they're paying their insurance and their gas to get to and from work because they need to work, and there's not a lot left over. So I think there's a huge influx of people that are needing extra help. So we figured it'd be higher, but we had no idea that it would be 700, no idea.
Stroud says they need $24,000 to fill those 700 hampers for families ranging from 3 to 17 people. She says people who wish to help can either donate directly or offer to sponsor a family. Premier Wab Kinew unveiled a legal opinion on Monday, saying Manitoba cannot stop collecting the federal carbon tax on home heating. That's what the legal opinion was. The opposition PCs say that doesn't matter. Tory energy critic Grant Jackson says the carbon tax has already lost in the court of public opinion. He says Manitoba should have the courage to stop collecting the tax.
We know that Saskatchewan is moving ahead with this. We know that this may cause a bit of a disagreement, shall we say, with the federal government should our provincial government decide to implement this, but that doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do.
PC leader Heather Stephenson has said for months the Tories have a favourable legal opinion of their own. When asked to produce that opinion, they have declined to do so. A Winnipeg man accused of giving cannabis candies to trick-or-treaters on Halloween last year no longer faces prosecution. The charges against Sheldon Chochinov have been stayed. Chochinov was one of 2 people charged after police said they got more than a dozen reports of cannabis candies being given out in a South Tuxedo neighborhood. Police said children who received the edibles were between 6 and 16 years old. Chochinov's co-accused, Tammy Sigader, pleaded guilty in September to inadvertently handing out those candies. Chochinov's lawyer told a judge his client had no knowledge of possessing any illegal substances. The Public Prosecution Service of Canada says the charges against Chochinov were stayed because the case no longer met the threshold for prosecuting. A Manitoba town's grief in the wake of a teen's brutal murder more than 30 years ago is at the heart of a new docu-film.
I often describe what happened that night as a lightning strike. Some individuals were struck by lightning. Some individuals saw the lightning bolt strike, but the whole community heard the thunder.
Altona debuted and won an award at the Whistler Film Festival over the weekend. It's named after the small town where 2 teens were tied up, assaulted, and left to die in a burning house on November 17th, 1990. Filmmaker Thomas Aufulter says he and his brothers wanted to use the film to step away from usual tactics employed by true crime.
The event itself is very harrowing, but then the documentary goes on to cover much more of the real world sort of human impact of this event. It's set up as a true crime piece.
The documentary features animations of never-before told eyewitness accounts, as well as a written statement by the convicted killer. You can read more on that story, as well as other Manitoba news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Heather Walls.
Thank you.
And to Megan Ketchison and Joni Nicolo in our news department this morning. Pat, I know you've been in a lot this morning. Anything new to add?
Are you tired of me already?
I'm totally sick of you. No, I'm not.
What do I have to say at 8:35 in the morning? Clouds. I'm looking at those clouds outside. It's pretty thick. The province has a lot of cloud cover. We have fog in the southwestern corner of the province. We've been hearing from commuters in southwestern Manitoba, Brandon area, Verdon area, and Crystal City, etc. So some spotty fog in that area that will dissipate in a while. We're expecting to see a mix of sun and cloud, and we'll get to a -1 in the city of Winnipeg. Brandon's going to get to a +1, and Thompson is going to get to a -4. It's -8 right now in Thompson. It is -5 in Winnipeg, and Brandon, you are -5 as well, but some freezing fog being reported in that area. Have a fabulous Tuesday, everybody.
Thank you. I just had a small yawn. Sorry, YouTube, Nate. Sometimes I'm not used to the camera.
Yeah, I'm very exciting, and I bore Marcy.
No,
so that's
you
what we
don't.
can take from that.
We're just nearing the end of the show. It's been a good one, been a busy one. By the way, if you missed anything on the show, please check out our CBC Listen app. Check it out there. You can also go back on YouTube and check out interviews there as well. Coming up on The Current, as more people continue to work from home, what do you do with all that empty office space? Could that be part of the picture to improve housing across Canada? That discussion coming up on The Current. Thank you to our live team. I already mentioned our news department. Thank you to Pat Kanuga, Abby Adeyemi, as well as Travis Peterson behind the YouTube controls. And thank you for listening. Take care, be well, Manitoba. We'll be back again tomorrow with another edition of Information Radio right here on CBC. I'm Marcy Markusa. See ya.